$300,000, Mom, sign it now, my son said, his voice cold as steel. Right beside him, my daughter-in-law folded her arms, lips pressed in a contemptuous smile. She cut in, sweet but venomous. If you really love your son, you won't let him get into trouble. The room that once felt warm suddenly turned airless. I, the woman who clipped coupons to feed and school my child, was being treated like a talking wallet. My son leaned in and whispered, "If you don't pay, they'll come for us first." Threats. Begging. Both lived in my son's eyes at once. I trembled, but I still poured tea and smiled. Under the table, my left hand quietly pulled out the key to the fake safe. "You'll have the money before tonight," I said softly. My son nodded, thinking he'd won. But when the door shut, I opened the real safe. Inside was the power of attorney that moved everything into my private trust. Tonight, it wouldn't be the money that disappeared. It would be me, the obedient mother he thought he knew. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Beverly Hale, 70 years old, living in San Diego, California. This cedar-sided beach house was where my husband Robert and I built a life. After he died of heart disease 12 years ago, I stayed alone, tending roses, making tea every afternoon, watching waves hit the shore. I thought I'd coast through the rest of my years in peace until this morning. Marcus, my only child, 45, walked in without knocking. I can still see him as a toddler tearing around the yard, shouting, "Mom," in that clear little voice. But today he came back like a stranger, cold, busy, and carrying the smell of trouble. With him was his wife, Tessa Lynn, the daughter-in-law I've never truly trusted. Tessa always arrives wrapped in expensive perfume with an appraising gaze, like she's pricing every object in the house. I used to think I was being unfair, that if Marcus was happy, that was enough. Over time, I realized Tessa didn't love Marcus. She loved what Marcus could extract from me. They sat across from me at the dining table, the same one where we used to gather every Thanksgiving. Marcus didn't ask how I was, no hug. He pulled a thick stack of papers from his leather case and slapped it onto the wood. Tessa slowly opened her handbag, took out a gold fountain pen, and placed it on top. "I need you to sign this," Marcus said, offering no explanation. I frowned. "Sign what, Marcus?" "Guarantee papers," Tessa answered for him, her voice sweet enough to sting. Well, we're having a small hiccup with an investment. If you help just a signature, this will be over in a few weeks." I pushed the paper back and skimmed it. A number in bright red. $300,000. My heart sank. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that's nearly all my savings. My pension barely covers medicine and the house. Where do you think I'm supposed to pull that kind of money from?" Marcus exhaled hard, as if I were the irresponsible child. "Mom, I know you have a separate account. I've seen the statements. Just help this one time. You don't need much. You live alone. The house is paid off. You're fine." Tessa folded her arms and smirked. "We're not asking. We're borrowing. But if you stall, the lender will lose patience. And then it won't just be us in trouble." I looked up at her and saw a cruel satisfaction in her eyes. She was enjoying every second of pushing me to bend. "Why should I trust you?" I asked quietly. "Last time you borrowed to expand the business. Before that it was to help a friend in urgent need. I've never seen a single dollar come back." Marcus clenched his jaw. "Don't be dramatic. I'm your son. I've never done anything to hurt you." I met his eyes. "You don't have to hurt me. Treating me like a tool is enough." The air thickened. I could hear the clock hands scrape. Forward. Marcus folded the paper and slid it toward me. "Mom, if you don't help, they'll come for me and Tessa. This isn't a joke." This time, there was real fear in his voice. I couldn't tell whether it was the lender or a money hunger choking him. I pressed my lips together and nodded. Fine. I'll take care of it. Marcus exhaled in relief. A smile returned, a smile I no longer recognized. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. Before tonight, okay? I nodded without a word. They left in a cloud of pricey perfume and Tessa's heels ticking coldly on the wood floor. When the door closed, I sat for a long while, listening to the wind thread through the frame. In the empty house, I looked around old photos, Christmas cards, the mug Marcus painted as a kid. I realized I may have lost my son long ago. Today just made it impossible to ignore. I stood and went to Robert's old piano. Under the lid, tucked among the scores he used to play, was the small steel box I'd hidden for over a decade, my real safe. Inside was the power of attorney Nora Patel had drawn up, transferring my retirement funds into a trust called B.H. Heritage, known only to Nora. I called Nora. Her voice was low and steady. Beverly, let me guess. Marcus came again? Worse, I said. He brought Tessa, and they want $300,000. After I explained, Nora sighed. Don't send anything, don't sign anything. Keep every original document. I'll trigger the asset protection file. I thanked her. Then I opened the envelope holding proof of prior transfers, more than $200,000 loaned over 8 years. Statements, notes, dates, and promises Marcus never kept. Before dark, I texted my sister Clara in Arizona. If you don't hear from me for a few days, don't worry, I'm just taking a trip, but please keep the family photo safe. It was our private safety signal. I withdrew some cash, then went to the bank to open a new account and stop all paper statements from going to the old address. When the clerk asked for the trust name, I smiled slightly. Heritage, the legacy of a mother who learned to stop paying other people's debts. That night, I packed a few changes of clothes, medications, passport, a USB with statements, and a small envelope I left on the kitchen table. Inside was one handwritten note. Marcus, you're right. I won't let them come for you. But I also won't let them find me. I looked around the house one last time, the place that held Robert's laughter, Marcus's little boy giggles, and my own belief that family love was unconditional. At 9 p.m., I locked the door, stepped out with a small suitcase, and called a car to Santa Fe Depot to catch the night train to New Mexico. My destination was Santa Fe, a place no one in our family had ever set foot. Through the train window, city lights blurred and dimmed. I clutched a small notebook, the ledger of every borrowed dollar from Marcus, each line a cut. As the train slipped into darkness, I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, Marcus would come for money. All he would find was an empty house and a mother who had disappeared, gone for good from the role of victim. Before leaving San Diego, I stopped by Mr. Coleman's, my neighbor across the street for 20 years. He's a lean former Navy man, eyes still clear and kind. I handed him the spare keys and said softly, "Would you water the roses for me? I'm visiting an old friend for a bit." He nodded without prying. We've known each other long enough to understand that silence can be the kindest act. I added, "If anyone asks, I'm on vacation. And please don't accept any packages for me." Mr. Coleman smiled gently. "Don't worry, Beverly. I kept silent for 40 years in the service. A few weeks won't be hard." I thanked him and walked away, a little lighter. From the station, I called Nora Patel. Her voice was husky but firm. "Beverly, I filed for asset protection. But you need one more thing. A limited power of attorney. If Marcus tries to claim your assets or files to have you declared incapacitated, I can stand in legally." I heard every word. In a world where your own son can use the law to strip you of everything, a friend like Nora feels like rare luck. She sent the document electronically. I printed it at a shop near the station and signed in front of a clerk as witness. We scanned and stored it in a secure cloud. For the first time in my life, justice felt like armor if you know how to put it on. Before leaving the house, I set a decoy envelope on the kitchen table. Inside were photocopied statements, a few pages listing Marcus's loans, and a single line in my handwriting. "You taught me how to live for myself." I knew Marcus was sharp enough to catch the subtext. The roles had changed. I was no longer the rescuer. I was the one pulling the boat away. I didn't go straight to Santa Fe. I took small hops, San Diego to Flagstaff, Arizona, then to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I paid in cash, swapped my old SIM, and shut off all location services. The train rattled through desert night. Outside, ribbons of yellow light faded into black. I leaned back, the rails clacking like a heartbeat. Every bend felt like a new breath, freedom woven with fear. In Flagstaff, I stayed one night. The high country city was cold and still. The scent of pine threaded my hair. In a small cafe, I wrote, "Day 1, leaving what I used to call home." I didn't know whether I was running away or finding my way back, only that for the first time in years, I chose my own direction. 3 days later, I reached Santa Fe. Small, sun-bright, with a cozy old-world feel, like a many-colored wool blanket. I rented a tiny room near the plaza, thick adobe walls, low roofline, a faint smell of wood smoke. The landlady, Isabel, a widowed Mexican woman, spoke as softly as wind. When I paid cash for the first week, she just nodded. "Here, we don't ask too many questions. Make yourself at home." That nearly made me cry. It had been a long time since I'd heard the word home without flinching. I spent the first days settling into a new rhythm. Mornings, I walked around Santa Fe Plaza, where native artisans display silver bracelets and woven scarves. Afternoons, I sat in a nearby cafe, watching the world go by with a cup of chamomile to steady my hands. Evenings, I sat at the small wooden table, opened my laptop, and logged every dollar Marcus took, date by date, reason by reason. I pulled old texts, searched transfer emails, marked every broken promise. I wanted a precise timeline, a full picture of how my son turned his mother into an endless bank. The more I wrote, the clearer I felt. Each number stung, but pain sharpened my resolve to see this through. One night, Nora called. "Beverly, I checked your credit file. It looks like Marcus or someone opened a sub-account under your name. That's identity theft. We need to lock this down now." My hands shook around the phone. The invasion of my money, my name, my dignity made it hard to breathe. Nora walked me through calling the bank to freeze any unauthorized activity and filing with the credit bureaus. She also urged me to get a cognitive capacity evaluation in case Marcus tried to claim I was not competent and seize control. The next morning, I went to a local clinic. The Dr. Leland, a middle-aged man, listened while I told part of my story, then said, "You're sharper than many people I see, Mrs. Hale. Your clarity is its own evidence." I smiled faintly. For the first time in years, someone told me I was clear-minded, not weak, not old, not confused. When he signed the certificate, it felt like reclaiming a lost piece of myself. That afternoon, I went to the Santa Fe police station to meet Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, whom Nora had referred. She's around 40, sun-browned, eyes keen but not cold. As I described Marcus and the vague threats about dangerous lenders, she nodded. "You did the right thing leaving. We see this a lot, adult children using financial danger to coerce parents. If you get anything suspicious, forward it straight to me." She wrote her direct number on a card and handed it over. I tucked it into my wallet like a small charm. That night in my little room, I opened the window to let desert wind in. On the table lay my new phone, a brand new SIM only 3 people knew: Nora Patel, my sister Clara, and Lieutenant Alvarez. 3 people. 3 layers of protection. I called it my safety chain, a small, sturdy circle around me. I looked up at the Santa Fe sky stars scattered like salt on velvet. I realized something. All my life I thought safety meant being close to family. Turns out, real safety is not having to fear your own family. I closed my notebook and added one. Last line for day 7. I don't know what tomorrow holds. But for the first time, I'm not just existing, I'm living on purpose. Next morning, church bells drifted from afar, mixed with the smell of fresh roasted coffee. I put on a jacket and stepped outside. The early sun washed the red earth walls, reflecting warmth into my eyes, strange but hopeful. I knew the road ahead was long and Marcus wouldn't give up easily. But at least this time, I was a step ahead. Maybe that's where freedom starts. A few days after I settled in Santa Fe, my new phone started ringing nonstop. Unknown numbers. No caller ID. But I knew who it was. Marcus. The first call, his voice shook, pretending to be gentle. "Mom, I'm sorry about losing my temper." Tessa panicked, and I wasn't calm. "I just need a short-term loan. I'll pay you right back." I said nothing. I listened to prove I could keep my silence. A few hours later, the second call, his voice cold, sharp, mean. "If you won't think you can disappear and not be found, you're wrong. I know where you are. Don't push me to do something stupid." I hung up. My heart pounded, but I wasn't shaking. I opened my notebook and logged the date, time, and content of each call. Not to remember, to use as evidence. 3 days later, an anonymous email landed in the inbox I use only with Nora. Subject: "Look what they did in your name." My palms were slick as I opened it. Inside, a photo of a loan contract, Tessa as primary signer, with my forged signature as asset guarantor. The interest rate, 37% per month. A chill ran through me. Someone was using my name, my signature, even my reputation to legalize a mountain of debt. Under the notary block, a scrawl read, "Mother agreed verbally." I could practically hear the sneer in that line. I printed everything and sent copies to Nora. Half an hour later, she called. "Beverly, this is signature forgery and identity misuse. We're filing a complaint immediately. I'll deal with the bank." Her tone was calm, but I heard anger braided through it. I knew Nora wasn't just defending a client. She was defending a friend. The next day, Nora reported, "The bank confirmed a sub-account authorization filed under my name submitted last month at a branch only blocks from Marcus's house." The signature looked close enough that I had to study the final stroke to see a wobble. I shook not from fear, but from hurt. My son had forged my name. "Beverly," Nora said on the phone, "I filed the forgery complaint. From here on, be extremely careful. They may try to find you and pressure you to drop it." I was quiet, then asked softly, "Can Marcus do something worse than this?" Nora sighed. "With someone drowning in debt and losing control, you should be ready for anything." The next day, I met with Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez. I told her everything. She listened, took notes, and lifted her eyes now and then with steady resolve. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "I think you should temporarily move to the city's safe house for seniors facing financial abuse. It has 24/7 protection. I'll arrange it personally." I looked at my small, warm room and the wood smoke in Isabel's kitchen. Then I nodded. "I understand. I'll go." The safe house sits on the city's south side, in a quiet neighborhood. From the outside, it looks like a small lodge. Long porches, rocking chairs, a lavender garden. Inside, warm light, the smell of fresh-baked sweets, radio news in the afternoon. I was greeted by June, the coordinator, a woman around my age, with a patient smile. "Here, no one asks what you've lost," she said as she gave me a tour. "We help you take yourself back." My room had a bed, a desk, and a window facing the grassed hill. That first night, wind slid past the frame, and for the first time in weeks, I slept through. In the days there, I met many women like me. An 80-year-old forced by her son to sell her house to invest. Another whose granddaughter drained her retirement account and vanished. We sat around a wooden table, telling and listening, no one judging. Every story was a wound, but proof I wasn't alone. The pattern was always the same: manipulation, guilt, threat, dependence. You don't need shouting to abuse someone. Sometimes 3 words, "Don't you love me?" are enough to make an old woman buckle. On June's advice, I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus. Each needed a different PIN, and I mailed separate security letters. I added 2-factor authentication to every bank and email account. Each small step made me stronger, not because I'm tech-savvy, but because I was taking back control. Meanwhile, Nora sent a case summary. All prior transfer statements, a call log with Marcus's threats, the anonymous email with the loan contract, images of the forged signature. I printed everything and tucked it neatly into a blue file folder. It wasn't just legal evidence, it was the story of how my own child treated me like a living piece of collateral. One morning, I got a message from Tessa. No saved number, just a short line. "They'll come to your house first. Don't stay there." I read it over and over. Who were they? Marcus, or the people Tessa owed money to? That question hung in my head all day. That evening, I called Lieutenant Alvarez. She said, "It's possible Tessa is genuinely scared. We'll increase undercover patrols around the shelter. As for you, don't go out without telling us first." I agreed. I didn't want to trust Tessa, but I understood. Desperate people can do anything. The next day, Nora called back and told me I should file for a temporary protective order against Marcus. I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to believe my son was just confused, that if given a chance, he'd feel remorse. "Beverly," Nora said slowly, "this isn't revenge. It's for your safety. If you don't do it, he could come back, and next time, it won't just be about money." I stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded even though she couldn't see it. "I'll do it. I'll file tomorrow." The Santa Fe County Court processed the paperwork quickly. I filled in each field. Accused, Marcus Hale. Behavior, harassment, financial threats, identity fraud. My hand shook a little as I signed, but I signed anyway. As I left the courthouse, Nora called, "Beverly, I want you to tell your story to the district attorney's office. They have a special program for elder abuse. If we frame this case properly, we can protect you longer term." I looked up at the Santa Fe sky. Bright sun. Dry wind like sea salt. "Okay," I said. If staying silent for decades only made things worse, then this time, I'll speak. That night, I sat alone by the window. Far away, cars passed and their headlights slid across the glass, each streak of light, reminding me life kept moving even when someone had turned away from me. In the rearview mirror of my past, I saw the face of a mother who always forgave, always yielded, always paid other people's debts. Now, the person in the mirror was still me, but the eyes were different. I said softly to myself, if anyone looks back one day, they'll know. I chose to save myself before it was too late. And in that moment I realized, a rearview mirror isn't just for looking back, it's to make sure you're leaving what's wrong behind you. One morning in early May, a light knock woke me up. It was June, the shelter coordinator. Her face was usually gentle, but today it was tight with worry. "Beverly," she whispered, "the police just called. 2 men parked outside the fence all night. They didn't get out, they just sat in the car looking toward the shelter." I tightened my robe. "Did they say anything?" No. But Lieutenant Alvarez has been alerted. The police are increasing undercover patrols around here. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I had thought I'd gone far enough to avoid Marcus's reach, but distance is never enough when the person chasing you shares your blood. That afternoon, Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez came by. She was in plain clothes and carried a thick folder. "Mrs. Hale, we need your cooperation for a sting," she said. "We have to find out who's really behind this, Marcus, or someone else." I sat up straight. "Tell me what to do." "We'll have you log back into your old bank account from a downtown coffee shop. Undercover officers will be nearby, capturing all the data. If anyone is tailing you, we'll know." I nodded. Inside, I felt fear and resolve at once. I had run once. I didn't want to run forever. 2 days later, I sat with Alvarez in an unmarked police car, parked a few hundred yards from the Adobe Bean Cafe. The Santa Fe sun was harsh, the road mottled with tree shadows. I wore a light jacket and a wide-brimmed hat, just another elderly tourist. Through a small earpiece, Alvarez said, "When I signal, go in, order your drink, open your laptop, and log in like usual." I gave a small laugh even as my heart raced. You know, when I was young, I thought sting operations only happened in movies. Who knew I'd be the lead at 70? She chuckled, then grew serious again. "You're stronger than a lot of younger people, Mrs. Hale." I went in and chose a seat by the window. The cappuccino steamed and smelled wonderful. My hands shook a little as I opened the laptop and typed in my login. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. "Welcome, Beverly Hale" popped up, and I exhaled. But a few minutes later, a security alert flashed. "Another device is attempting to sign into this account from a location 48 miles away." I looked up. Across the street, a gray SUV sat parked, the windshield reflecting sunlight and hiding whoever was inside. Alvarez's voice crackled in my ear. "We see it. IP confirmed access origin is near Marcus's workplace in San Diego. We'll seek a search warrant." I closed my eyes for a moment. Part of me had known, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. 3 days later, Alvarez called. They'd arrested a young man named Greg Hudson as he tried to leave the state. In his pocket was a slip of paper with my boarding house address, some cash, and a note. "Just scare her. Don't do anything stupid." Under that line were initials, M.H. I went silent. "Greg says Marcus hired him to tail you," Alvarez said. "Do you want me to read the rest of his statement?" "I need to hear it," I said. She lowered her voice. "Marcus said he wanted to bring Mom home safely before someone else takes advantage of her. That's how he justified it." I laughed, but it sounded rough and bitter. "Bring me home safely? By hiring someone to scare me in the middle of the night?" Alvarez stayed quiet to let me breathe. My heart felt like it split in two, not from fear, but from realizing that the child who once hugged me had become a stranger. If it were you, how would you react when the person you love most uses fear to control you? I truly want to hear your thoughts in the comments because sometimes honest sharing is what helps us recognize our own strength. When the call ended, I sat for a long time, staring into the sunlit courtyard. Some truths need no more proof. I understood then. Marcus was willing to sell out his mother to escape his debts. In that moment, a door inside me closed for good. I wasn't going back. I called Nora Patel and told her everything. She listened and said right away, "Beverly, I'm filing for a temporary freeze on all real estate in your name. I don't want anyone using this to shift assets to creditors." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Thank you, Nora. More and more, I feel like you're the one holding the map for my life." Nora gave a small laugh. "No, Beverly. I'm just holding the flashlight. You're the one walking." That night, I set a small recorder on the table and began telling my life story. Not for the court for me, I talked about Howard, my husband, gentle but weak, the man who promised to protect me forever, then left early, and I filled the void with sacrifice. I talked about Marcus, the first time he lied at 17, the smile on his wedding day with Tessa, and the look in his eyes the day he tried to force my signature. I saved everything to the cloud, locking it with Robert's birth date, so if anyone ever stumbled on it, they'd know this was the story of someone who loved too much and learned to stop in time. After I left the shelter, I signed up for a basic self-defense class at the senior community center. The instructor was a petite woman named Carmen, a former police officer. She taught me to use breath to balance, how to break a wrist hold, how to look someone in the eye without shaking. The body remembers how to stand tall, she said. You just have to give it the chance. The first class, I fell twice and bruised my knees. By the third week, I could block a light strike and twist away from a grab. Each time I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman returning, no longer hunched, no longer just enduring. One evening, right after class, my phone rang. Tessa. Her breath was ragged. I could hear things crashing in the background. Beverly, help me. Marcus is out of control. He smashed everything, locked me out of my accounts, and said he's taking the kids to Mom's safe place. I froze, cold sweat running down my back. Stay calm, Tessa. Where are you? In the bedroom. He just stepped out, probably to call someone. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath. Listen to me, do not come to me. Absolutely not. Take the kids to the nearest women and children's shelter. I'll call Lieutenant Alvarez. She'll help. But, no buts. Marcus isn't safe. Don't let him lead you by the nose again. I heard her sob, then a door slam. Before I hung up, I said, Tessa, don't think you're doing this for me. Do it for yourself. Right after that, I called Lieutenant Alvarez. She picked up after a single ring. I know, she said quickly. We just got word from San Diego PD. Marcus left the house with a suitcase and 2 registered firearms. They're tracking him. My hands went ice cold. Don't worry, she continued. I'll coordinate with California and get Tessa and the kids to safety. No one will know where you are. I sat down, heart hammering. In that moment, I understood this fight wasn't just legal, it was about survival. Out the window, evening light stretched across the dirt road, staining the bougainvillea fence red. I closed my eyes and prayed for Tessa and my 2 grandkids. Then I opened my notebook and wrote one simple line. If Marcus has turned mother and son into a battlefield, then I choose to stand up, not to win, but to survive and keep what's human in me. Outside, the wind rose and rattled the door. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the knock at my front door. A text from Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez arrived close to midnight. Just a few lines. Tessa and the kids are safe. Marcus was stopped on Interstate 8. No one was hurt. I read it several times. In the dark, my chest tightened, relief mixed with heaviness. I didn't want to picture Tessa clutching the kids and crying in a police car, but at least they were away from their father's hands. The next morning, Nora Patel called. Her voice was clear and steady, as always. Beverly, it's time to move from defense to offense. What do you mean? We're going to formally sue Marcus on 3 counts: elder financial abuse, signature forgery, and third-party threats to your safety. I've almost finished the file. I gripped the receiver. In my entire life, I never imagined a mother would have to sue her own son. But now, it wasn't a choice. It was my duty to protect what was left of me. 3 days later, I met Nora at her downtown Santa Fe office. She spread a stack of files nearly a hand thick across the table. Bank records, statements, emails, images of the fake contract, and my sworn declaration, a detailed account of everything. Beverly, she said slowly, the evidence is strong. But I want 2 additions: a medical capacity letter and audio recordings of the threats. Together, they'll show you're fully competent, coerced, and threatened." I nodded. I had both. I handed over a USB with the recordings and Dr. Leland's letter. "You're right. I won't let anyone use my age to turn me into a pawn." I signed every page, the pen line a little shaky but firm. When I put the final signature down, it felt like closing a whole chapter, not just of the case, but of the old life where I explained, covered, and forgave Marcus over and over. A week later, the Santa Fe County Court granted a temporary no-contact order against Marcus Hale and required him to appear for a hearing within 10 days. When Nora read me the notice, my hands warmed not from victory, but from feeling, for the first time, that the law stood with me. I no longer had to cower behind fears of being labeled an overbearing mother or a paranoid old woman. Now each document and signature in the file was proof I was protecting myself, not destroying anyone. On the morning of the hearing, I wore a navy coat, the color Robert liked. The courthouse was small, bright-walled, and chilly. I walked in and saw Marcus across the room. He was clean-shaven, hair slicked, white shirt crisp. When he saw me, he gave a sad smile, as if to say, "I'm just a misunderstood victim." Beside him stood his young, well-dressed attorney with a thick stack of papers. As the judge entered, Marcus stood, voice wavering. "Your Honor, I only wanted to help my mother. I never threatened her, never forged her signature. Someone used my name. My mother and I were very close. She's just emotionally influenced." I met his eyes. Those pleas no longer weakened me. Across the room, Lieutenant Alvarez and Nora sat ready. The judge asked for the digital evidence. The screen lit up IP data from the bank login at the cafe. The address was clear: Marcus's San Diego office. Then, the bank's surveillance footage, the person filing the fake authorization, Marcus himself, in dark glasses and a dark jacket. The courtroom went dead quiet. Marcus dropped his gaze and bit his lip. His lawyer fumbled through the papers. The judge spoke briefly. "The evidence is consistent. The no-contact order remains. If further proof appears regarding a sham loan agreement, the court authorizes referral for criminal will d'obtuar, prosecution." I closed my eyes and took a long breath. Not joy, not triumph, just a quiet peace, like breathing after years of holding my breath. That evening, I got a text from Tessa. She forwarded an email from Marcus's account. "Keep Mom's name on the house, it's easier to borrow. If things go bad, she'll take the hit." Just one short line, but it ended any doubts. Nora printed it immediately and filed it with the court. "This is the final piece," she said. "He can't deny it now." At the next proceeding, I was asked to testify under oath. I stood straight, hand on the Bible, voice steady. I told everything, from the pressure to sign for $300,000, to the calls and threats, to the days I spent running. I spoke with the calm of someone who'd hit bottom and climbed back. And when I ended with, "I'm not speaking to get revenge. I'm speaking so people like me know they're not alone." The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded, his eyes warmer than I'd seen. For the first time in months, I felt free, not because I'd won, but because I told the truth under oath without fear of losing my son. 3 days later, Marcus violated the no-contact order. He sent me a long message, half threat, half plea. "You're destroying this family. I can make it all go away, just drop the case." I forwarded everything to Nora and Lieutenant Alvarez. In less than 24 hours, Marcus was remanded for the violation and for threatening a witness. When I got the news, I simply placed my hand on my chest and whispered, "Justice still works, even if slowly." I gathered the few things I'd kept at the shelter and moved into a small studio downtown. The place was just a little over 320 square feet, white walls, a window over a sunlit street. Using the BH Heritage Trust, I signed a 1-year lease and prepaid 6 months. On the first day, I hung a photo of me and Robert when we were young, his bright smile, his hand on my shoulder. I switched on the warm lamp, made chamomile tea, sat at the table, and looked out the window. No one knew who I was in this city, and for the first time, that felt good. No one asked what kind of mother I'd been, what mistakes I'd made, why my son had betrayed me. I was simply Beverly Hale, a 70-year-old woman starting over. As night fell, I opened my laptop and typed a few lines to Nora. "I've signed the lease. Thank you for helping me keep both my assets and my dignity," she replied almost immediately. "You don't owe me thanks. You saved yourself. I'm just a witness to that journey." I smiled and closed the laptop. Outside, Santa Fe lit up. Soft music drifted from a nearby bar and wove into the night breeze. I sipped my tea and felt the warmth slide down my throat. Maybe tomorrow I'd still be in court, still facing painful memories, but at least I was standing on my own 2 feet. And for me, after everything, that was already a victory. Santa Fe has a habit all its own. Saturday mornings smell like cinnamon and ring with guitars on the Central Plaza. After years of living like a ghost in my own house, I eased into that rhythm, slowly but surely. I brought a few hand-embroidered scarves and pecan pies I baked myself, and rented a tiny booth at the craft market near the plaza. The setup was just an old wooden table with a blue cloth, a few jars of wildflowers, and a hand-lettered sign, "Beverly's Pies, sweet enough, never harsh." People stopped, chatted, tasted. Some complimented, some joked. "You bake like you're from the South, don't you?" I just smiled. Yes, I brought the taste of my old home, but not the past. The money wasn't much, but it was steady. Some days I sold out before noon, other days I barely covered the booth fee. Strangely, every time I packed up, I felt fuller than any bank account had ever made me feel. One morning, the booth next to me was taken by a neat, silver-haired woman with a trim figure and thin-rimmed glasses. She introduced herself as Agnes, 75, an accountant for 40 years at an insurance company. "You sell pies? I sell knit bags. On slow days we can trade," she said. I laughed. "If your bag can hold a pie box, deal." We quickly became friends. Agnes was witty, practical, and straight to the point. One afternoon she pulled out a small notebook and said, "Beverly, now that you're on your own, you need a personal budget. Don't let money boss you around again. I'll show you the 50-30-20 rule." I widened my eyes. Sounds like a 10th grade math problem. "It's not hard," she laughed. 50% for essentials, 30% for joy, 20% for savings or an emergency fund. That's it. That night I tried it. I wrote in my notebook, rent, $800, groceries and utilities, $400, personal $5, spending, $200, savings, $240. Not big, not much, but every number was chosen by me, and that's what made me feel free. The next month, I asked the community center for permission to start a free embroidery class for older women. Only 6 people came, but on the first day the little room filled with laughter. We sat in a circle, needles clicking, the faint smell of cinnamon tea in the air. Between stitches they told their stories. About a son who borrowed his mother's pension and never paid it back. About a granddaughter who took all the savings under the name of investing. About an ex-husband who kept signing his wife's name on debt papers. I didn't interrupt anyone. Only when they paused did I say, "We stitch to remember that every stitch can mend a tear, even the ones inside." And so, my embroidery class became a quiet sharing place for people who'd been hurt, a simple kind of healing that worked better than any medicine. One afternoon, Lieutenant Alvarez called. Her voice was low and clear. "Mrs. Hale, I have an update. The district attorney's office has accepted your case. Marcus Hale will face charges of fraud and threats. They'll send an official summons within 2 weeks. I sat still, as if someone had just opened a window and let the light rush in. I didn't feel joy, just lightness. So light that tears fell before I noticed. She added, "You should be prepared. The defense may ask to negotiate." I answered immediately, "If it's about money, I won't negotiate. I've paid enough in this life." A few days later, Tessa called again. She said she was settled in a women and children's shelter and had started a part-time job at a local grocery store. The kids had been enrolled at a nearby school with tuition support. "I know you don't want to hear my voice," she said, "but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," I answered softly. "It's not to me who needs to hear it, it's you who needs to say it. Keep living decently, Tessa. Don't let someone else's mistakes define the rest of your life." After I hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. In that silence, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I also started attending group therapy for victims of financial abuse. At the first session, the facilitator, a psychologist named Dr. Ray, asked, "What's the hardest thing after leaving an abusive situation?" I raised my hand. "Learning to believe I have the right to say no without feeling guilty." He nodded. "Exactly. We're going to learn the language of boundaries. No one gets to set your value except you." From then on, I practiced answering briefly and firmly, without over-explaining. Once, a neighbor asked, "Aren't you sad that your son got arrested?" I just smiled. "Sad, yes, but it would be worse if I'd done nothing." That answer made me feel a year older in the best way. One night, after the embroidery class ended, I sat by the window and wrote a letter to Marcus that I didn't send. White paper, careful handwriting. "Son, I'm not writing to reclaim our bond or to judge you. I just want you to understand that I won't pay for you anymore. No money, no silence, no carrying the consequences of choices you made. I still pray for you, but I won't sacrifice myself for a fake peace. Mom." I folded the letter and placed it in the desk drawer where I keep an old box of receipts. Maybe I'll never send it, but just writing it down set me free. A few days later, Nora called to remind me, "Beverly, if anyone from Marcus's side or his attorney contacts you, don't respond. They'll try for a financial settlement. Just forward everything to me." I laughed. "Don't worry. I've gotten good at the art of silence." "Not just silence," Nora said. "You've learned how to choose what's worth hearing. That's real power. I started Best House, treating myself to small things I used to call luxuries. A good pair of walking shoes, a pocket map of the city, and each morning a walk along Canyon Road, a long, tree-lined street filled with galleries and artisan shops. I'd stop at a small cafe, sip coffee, and watch the sunlight come through the glass, catching the white steam rising from a porcelain cup. Every step, every breath made me feel my body coming back to life. Not for anyone else, for me. People say old age is when you slow down, but for me, it felt like learning to move at my own right pace for the first time. Time passed. Santa Fe's summer was bright and windy. I still went to the craft market every weekend, still taught the embroidery class on Tuesdays, still tracked my spending by the 50-30-20 rule Agnes taught me. And one morning, tying up my hair in the mirror, I suddenly noticed my smile had come back. Not the polite smile when someone compliments you, not the social smile in a meeting, but a real smile, natural, not for anyone else, just for me. I used to live for my child, for my husband, for the family. Now, I'm learning to live for myself slowly, quietly, but as steady as the early sunlight on Santa Fe rooftops, and I know I'll never lose that smile again. The hearing was set for a Monday morning at the end of fall, when the air in Santa Fe turns crisp and golden light slants through courthouse windows. I sat in the witness waiting room, hands on my knees. Outside, I heard the heavy footsteps of court officers, the rustle of paperwork, and that thin, watery coffee smell every courthouse seems to have. Nora sat beside me, reviewing the file, her voice low and steady. "We have everything we need, Beverly. Digital evidence, IP logs, the signature analysis, and Tessa's testimony. Today, you don't have to fight, you only have to tell the truth." I smiled, small and calm. For years I thought telling the truth only brought ridicule. Turns out, sometimes it takes a lifetime to reach a place where truth is heard. The courtroom wasn't large, with high ceilings and bright lights. Marcus was already there, in a dark suit, cropped hair, his face more drawn than before. When he saw me, he dipped his head slightly somewhere between regret and calculation. Across the aisle, Tessa sat with her attorney, eyes down, hands clasped tight. The judge began. Digital evidence appeared on the big screen. IP access data from Marcus's office computer, emails he sent to financial partners with my forged signature, and a signature analysis confirming a 98% match. Then came Tessa's testimony. Her voice trembled, but it was clear. Marcus told me to sign his mother's name on the contract, said she'd never know. He promised it'd only be a few weeks and we'd pay it back. I was foolish enough to believe him. Marcus suddenly shot up. "You signed too! You were in on it!" The judge rapped the gavel. "Defendant, sit down." The room seemed to freeze. Then the defense tried their story. Marcus was a victim exploited by bad partners, that he didn't fully understand the financial documents, that others manipulated every decision. But then the message log appeared. On the screen, a text Marcus had sent a friend read, "If she finds out, I'll say it was a system error. Worst case, I'll fake remorse. She's old, she won't dare report her son." The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat between the heavy breaths of my son across from me. When the judge called my name, my legs shook a little. I stepped to the stand, right hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The lights were warm, but weighty. "Missus Hale," the judge asked, "do you have anything you want to present to the court?" I took a deep breath. "Your Honor," I began, slow and low, "I'm not here for money or to watch my son be punished. I'm here to say what many older women like me have kept quiet for too long." I paused, looking down at a few elders watching quietly from the benches. I was taught to submit from a young age, submit to a husband, to family, to my child. I thought that was love. In truth, it was fear of being abandoned, dressed up. My throat tightened, but I went on. When the person I gave birth to used that, I learned that love cannot save anything if there are no boundaries. I turned to Marcus. "Son, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean going back." The courtroom was utterly still, only the quiet tap of the clerk's pen. That afternoon, the verdict was read. The judge spoke slowly, word by word. "This court finds the defendant, Marcus Hale, guilty of financial fraud, forging legal documents, and threatening an elder. The defendant is sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison, ordered to pay full financial restitution, and restricted from direct contact with the plaintiff for 5 years after release." Marcus stood motionless. I didn't cheer or clap. I just exhaled, slowly, as if I'd finally set down a boulder I'd carried on my back for years. A week later, a correctional officer called Nora. "Defendant Marcus Hale requests a supervised visit with his mother." I thought about it for a long time. In the end, I agreed. Not to hear an apology, but to close this story for good. The jail sat on the city's edge, with high concrete walls and a heavy iron gate. A guard led me through 3 doors, each closing with a cold, final sound. When Marcus walked in, I barely recognized him. Orange jumpsuit, dark circles, hollow cheeks. He sat across from me behind thick glass, his voice rough. "I just wanted to save the family. I never meant to hurt you." I looked him in the eye, gentle but firm. "No, Marcus. You sold the family to save yourself, to dodge responsibility, debt, and growing up. Every dollar you took from me was a piece of trust you can't buy back." He lowered his head, tears hitting the table. I said nothing more. There was nothing left to say. When the guard called time, I stood and looked through the glass one last time. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a bare truth. Sometimes, losing your child is the price you pay to keep yourself. Outside the jail, the Santa Fe wind blew hard, carrying dust and sun. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at. I lifted my face to it, and my shoulders felt half as heavy. For the first time in years, I felt real freedom, not from the outside, but from within. On the way back, I stopped at my usual cafe near the plaza. The barista asked, "The usual?" I nodded. "Still a cappuccino, but add a little cinnamon, today's special." That evening, as sunset turned my small studio gold, I opened my notebook and wrote the first line of my new plan. Project New Dawn Seniors, a New Dawn. I want to turn my wounds into a handhold for others. Elder women, tricked into signing papers, men whose pensions were taken, older people living quietly in fear they deserve a place to be believed, to be heard, to be protected. I built a simple website and called for volunteers to run a free hotline for elders facing financial abuse. Nora agreed to be our legal advisor, and Lieutenant Alvarez helped connect us with social services. Agnes helped me draft a budget, and the women from the embroidery class volunteered as assistants. We chose a sunflower blooming in the desert as our symbol because no matter how dry the ground, it still turns toward the light. Night fell, and I sat alone by the window. Santa Fe was quiet. Faint music drifted from the bar up the block. I sipped tea and watched the lights shimmer on the glass. In them, I saw an older woman with silver hair whose eyes no longer held fear, only peace. I whispered to myself, "Every crack can be a doorway to light, if you dare to look." And I knew that, after everything, my life had truly begun again. On the morning of New Dawn Senior's first talk, I woke at 5 a.m. Santa Fe was still misty, a light breeze slipping through my small window, carrying the smell of coffee from the shop on the corner. I brewed a cup for myself and watched the early light filter through the trees, light that reminded me that every beginning, even a late one, is worth it. The talk was at the Plaza Vieja Community Center. The room held only 50 people, but by the time I arrived, nearly every seat was full. Most were women over 60, silver hair, knit sweaters, eyes both curious and guarded. They looked like me a few years ago, carrying stories they hadn't yet dared to tell. I took the mic, my voice a little shaky at first, then steady when I saw Agnes smiling in the front row. "Hello," I began. "I'm Beverly Hale, and today I'm not here to talk about pain, but to tell you how I walked through it." The room went quiet. I told the story of the day Marcus pulled the plane chair from under me, right in the room that used to be my home. The moment I hit that cold tile was the moment I woke up, when I realized that if I stayed silent, I'd lose my soul. I didn't speak with tears, but with truth. No one interrupted, no whispers, only eyes shifting between shock and recognition. After my story, I held up a small sheet of paper with 3 bold lines. 1. Separate money. 2. Digital evidence. 3. Support network. "These 3, I said, are the 3 survival keys for everyone in this room," I explained. Separate money means keep an account no one else can access, not your child, spouse, or grandchild. Digital evidence is the habit of saving emails, texts, receipts. Don't delete anything because you don't want the hassle. Support network means people you can trust, an attorney, friends, neighbors. Community groups, the ropes that pull you back when you think you have no one. I added that with these 3 keys, I kept not only my assets but my humanity, the part that knows how to say enough to abuse. A woman in the middle row raised her hand. Do you ever regret suing your own son? I looked at her and smiled softly. Yes, but I'd regret it more if I'd done nothing. Silence is also a way of aiding harm. Heads nodded, and I knew I'd reach them. When the talk ended, I stepped off the stage. People lined up to greet me, shake my hand, some hugged me hard. In that stream of faces, I saw Tessa standing at the back, holding a canvas tote, thinner than before but with different eyes, calm and grateful. She didn't speak at first, just came closer. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me, even when I stood on the wrong side. I put my hand on her shoulder and smiled. We've all stood in the wrong place, Tessa. What matters is choosing to step out. She slipped away quietly, leaving me with a peace deeper than any courtroom win. 3 days later, the Santa Fe Journal ran a piece on the event. 70-year-old woman turns pain into a movement to protect elders. The photo showed me next to a whiteboard under the hand-scrawled line, New Dawn Seniors, because silence is not safety. That morning, our hotline took more than 20 calls. Most voices trembled on the other end. Mrs. Beverly, my son holds my whole pension. My husband won't let me have my own bank card. Can you tell me how to reach Attorney Nora? I wrote down every number, every name, every story. None of them were invisible anymore. And I realized my story had become a door for others to walk through. The next month, I ran a basic credit management workshop. Agnes agreed to be the lead instructor. She brought charts, markers, even her old calculator, carefully showing each person how to check a credit score, read a statement, and lock down accounts when they suspect exploitation. Money doesn't talk, she said, making the better balk. Room laugh, but it knows how to leave with whoever controls it. The class ran 3 hours, and no one left their seat. I looked around and saw trembling hands on keyboards, eyes brightening with each click. It was the look of people reclaiming control 1 inch, 1 account, 1 password at a time. A few weeks later, Lieutenant Alvarez joined us. She presented how to recognize and prevent financial abuse in families. Her voice was crisp and to the point, no frills. The person hurting you isn't always a stranger. Sometimes they eat with you and call you mom or dad, but the law doesn't care about titles, only actions. When she finished, she glanced my way and smiled. I nodded back, knowing it wasn't just me. The system itself was changing, step by steady step. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter from Marcus. The first line made me pause for a long time. Mom, I have no excuses left. In jail, I see that I only repeated what Dad did to you using love as a tool to control. There was less manipulation in his tone, no more rationalizing. At the end, Marcus wrote, I don't ask for forgiveness. I just hope you live well, because that will prove I didn't destroy you completely. I read it several times and set it on the table, my heart not as heavy as before. I replied briefly, Marcus, I read your letter, and I can feel the truth in it. I hope you seek counseling and learn to love without hurting. But I won't send money, and I won't intervene legally. I choose to believe you'll stand up on your own like I did. Mom. I folded the letter and sent it. When the envelope sealed, I knew the boundary between me and my son had finally been set clear and without trembling. That afternoon, I walked along the Santa Fe River. The water moved slowly, and the late-day sun scattered into thousands of flashing gold streaks across the surface. The breeze carried the scent of pine, damp earth, and the clean taste of... I thought of everything. The old house, the sleepless nights, the threatening calls, the days on the run. Then looked back at myself. now a silver-haired woman with flowers still on her hands, still able to laugh, still able to dream, and most importantly, still living. I'm not wealthy, my account isn't large, but I have enough. Enough to pay rent, enough to help a few others, enough to wake each morning without fearing the phone. I watched the river flow, saw my shadow stretch long, blending into the afternoon light. And in that moment, I knew my story was no longer a secret. It had become a reminder that freedom doesn't start with money, but with daring to say, I deserve peace. The following spring, Santa Fe turned unusually green. There was more rain. The wind smelled of wet soil and new leaves. One morning, while I was making tea, I got a call from Lieutenant Alvarez. Her voice was calm as always, but I could hear a note of caution. Mrs. Hale, I wanted to let you know, Marcus has been moved to a work release program. He's working on the city's urban tree planting crew. His rehabilitation record is good, no violations. He also submitted a request saying he will not attempt to contact you. I was quiet for a moment, listening to the breeze outside the porch. He's planting trees? Yes, she said. We're supervising. The Reentry Center also sent a behavior report. They note real progress, especially in emotional control and cooperation. I thanked her and hung up. Sitting there for a long while, I looked out the window. On the corner, a group of men in reflective vests were digging soil and staking straight rows of saplings. I didn't know if Marcus was among them, but the thought tightened my chest for the first time in years. The word work attached to my son didn't come with pain. That evening, I opened my laptop and went to the Greening Our Cities program website, the project Marcus had joined. Photos popped up. Work release participants planting trees, picking up trash, repainting graffiti walls, tending parks. In one, I saw a familiar figure, tall, thin, a baseball cap on, a shovel in hand. I couldn't be sure it was Marcus, but those slightly rounded shoulders brought back the image of the boy who once helped his father plant an apple tree in our backyard. That night, I wrapped a new gardening kit, gloves, pruning shears, and a book titled Greening Our Cities, Healing Through Labor. I sent it to the Reentry Center's address, with the sender listed as someone who believes in change. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't require the recipient to know exactly who sent it, only that it was sent gently at the right time. A few months later, New Dawn Seniors was invited to host a community workshop at the city library. The topic was financial freedom and self-respect in later life. That morning I prepared like always, printed materials, tested the mic, adjusted the slides. When I stepped onto the small stage, light filtered in from the windows, warm and soft. More than 100 people came twice our first event. I retold the stories and shared the 3 survival keys model I'd spoken about before. Everything went smoothly until I glanced at the back row where a man leaned against the wall, arms folded. Marcus. He wasn't in prison clothes, just jeans and a gray button-down. His eyes neither avoided mine nor pleaded. He simply watched, silent, like a listener. I kept going, even though my heart skipped once. When I finished, the room filled with applause. I smiled, bowed, and when I looked up, Marcus was still there, neither coming closer nor leaving. After everyone left, I walked over on my own. "Hello, Marcus," I said, steady as if greeting an old acquaintance. He dipped his head. "I only wanted to listen. I didn't mean to bother you." "Good. Then let's have coffee in a public place. This isn't reconciliation." I paused. "Just conversation." He looked up, eyelids flickering, then nodded. We sat in a small cafe on the corner of Canyon Road. Our table was by the window, looking out on a sidewalk lined with bougainvillea. Marcus set his cup down, hands still laced together, his voice low and slow. "I don't know where to start. Every day at work I watch the trees take root and I feel myself get smaller. I get that. Fixing anything means planting a little at a time. You can't force it to bloom. I looked out the window where a few young people pedaled by on bikes. You're right, I said, working with your hands can heal the self. It makes you face the truth that everything takes time. He gave a thin smile, eyes still down. The kids are doing well. Tessa sends photos, and I can view them at the center. I'm glad they don't hate me. They don't, I said. They're learning to understand. And that matters more. For a long moment, only the sound of a spoon tapping a porcelain cup. Finally, Marcus spoke softly. Mom, I'm sorry. I don't expect you to believe me. I just wanted to say it once. I nodded, not interrupting. I used to think an apology was the ending, but it's really the beginning. I'm learning to take responsibility without expecting forgiveness right away. I set my hand on the table without touching his. Forgiveness is a process, Marcus, I said, not a blank check. I'm on that road and you should walk your part too. Everyone has their own stretch. No one can shorten it for anyone else. Marcus nodded slightly, eyes wet. I understand. Thank you for talking with me. I stood up, leaving the unpaid check behind. Consider it my treat, I said with a small smile. Not out of debt, out of courtesy. When I left the cafe, I wasn't shaking anymore. No fear, no anger, only alertness and peace. Sometimes a boundary isn't a wall. It's a door open wide enough for air, with a latch to keep you safe. A few weeks later, New Dawn seniors received a small grant from the Santa Fe Community Fund. It wasn't a lot, but enough to add 2 new classes, one on legal self-defense skills and one on digital budget management. Enrollment doubled. Many came from nearby towns, saying they'd heard about us on local radio. I sat in our little meeting room, looking around at bright faces, people who once thought they had no more value. In them, I saw the resilience I once lost. Agnes came over and set a hand on my shoulder. Beverly, see? From one story, it's become a small movement. I smiled. I only plant seeds. Everyone else is doing the watering. Late that afternoon, I left the office and walked through the Central Park. Sunlight slanted through rows of new trees, fresh green leaves, trunks still wrapped in protective ties. I stopped and thought, maybe one of these was planted by Marcus. A light breeze passed, stretching my shadow along the sidewalk. That shadow didn't wobble like before it walked beside me, just right, without weighing me down. I thought, if I ever become a mother again, it will be a different role. Not the one who carries everything, not the rescuer, but a companion equal, able to love, to stop, and to say no. I smiled to myself. The shade behind me was still there, but this time I walked in my own light. I used to think that once things quieted down, the past would learn to sleep. Turns out the past is like a wind, you can't stop it from blowing against you. That day, I'd just finished a small New Dawn seniors workshop at the community center. The talk on the right to refuse to sign drew over 80 attendees, aging eyes lit with new confidence. I packed up, said goodbye, and noticed a man across the street, hands in his pockets, staring without blinking. At first I thought he was just curious. But when I turned down the next block, he followed. Not fast, not slow, keeping just enough distance to chill my heart. I stopped in the parking lot and turned around. "What do you want from me?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He smirked, his voice rough like smoke. "Nothing serious, Mrs. Hale. I just want to talk. About Tessa Lynn." That name made my blood go cold. "I lent her money," he continued, "and I heard you're the mother-in-law with assets. I just want to know if you plan to help the family." I looked him in the eye. "I don't help anyone by enabling threats. You should talk to an attorney, not me." He shrugged and stepped a half pace closer. "An attorney? That takes time. You've got money, I've got patience. Everybody softens eventually. I pulled a copy of my protective order from my bag and held it up in his face. You've crossed a line. Any behavior that looks like stalking or harassment, I have the right to call the police immediately. And I will. I dialed Lieutenant Alvarez. He hesitated. Don't think I don't know who you are, he said, backing toward his car, growling. Everyone's got a weak spot, even tough old ladies. In under 5 minutes, a patrol car pulled in. Alvarez stepped out, eyes sharp. You all right, Beverly? I am. But he knows too much. Alvarez scanned the area and signaled her team. We've confirmed it. He's a former lender of Tessa's, previously accused of predatory rates. I'll take it from here. When the car drove off with the man inside, I realized my hands were shaking. Alvarez put a hand on my shoulder. You followed every step exactly right. That's why we're launching an emergency hotline that connects New Dawn directly to the police center. You'll be the first to pilot it. A week later, New Dawn officially launched the Safe Connect hotline with support from the police department and the local community fund. I sat by the newly installed phone, feeling proud and moved. That line would let elders under financial threat report immediately, without wading through red tape. At the same time, we opened a new training: spotting sham loan contracts and avoiding blanket power of attorney. Agnes taught everyone how to read the fine print, and I shared real cases from people pressured by family to sign away their homes to those who lost everything through a temporary authorization. Sometimes, let me help you with the paperwork. Mom is the first line of a tragedy, I said, and the room went silent. More good news came from Tessa. She called one late afternoon, her voice lighter than I'd ever heard. Mom, I got a part-time job as a library assistant at the public library. The kids are settled at school too. Life is simple, but I feel at peace. I smiled, eyes stinging. Peace doesn't mean easy, Tessa. It's the reward for those who choose to pay the price. I know, she said. And I'm learning. When I hung up, my heart softened. Things seemed to be finding a new rhythm, a quieter life with more meaning. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Marcus's re-entry center. Inside were a few familiar, neat lines without excuses. Mom, my counseling program suggests I meet with the kids. I won't force it. If you and Tessa agree, I'm requesting a meeting at the center under a therapist's supervision. Below was the therapist's signature and confirmation that Marcus had complied with his behavior program. Tessa came by that evening with the letter, eyes red. I'm scared, but I know the kids need their dad. I agree, as long as it's supervised. What do you think? I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat by the window, watching moonlight spill across the floor. My head was full of questions. Had he truly changed? Was I opening a door to peace, or inviting risk back in? But then I thought of the 2 children, innocent lives caught between adult mistakes. I remembered Marcus's eyes when he talked about planting trees, about learning to take responsibility without demanding forgiveness. I decided. The next morning, I texted Tessa. I support it, but with conditions. Supervised at the therapy center, no private conversations, no talk about money, and if there's any negative sign, we stop immediately. Tessa replied, I promise. The meeting was held in the family therapy room at the center. A small room with pale yellow walls and double-pane windows for staff to observe. Marcus sat waiting in the chair opposite, calm, hands loosely clasped. When the kids walked in, the girl in a blue dress, the boy holding a toy robot, the room went completely still. Dad, the girl whispered. Marcus leaned forward and smiled a plain, unpolished smile. You've grown, he said, voice thick. I missed you. They sat and began talking about school, friends, little things like an art contest, and weekend pizza. Marcus made no promises. shed no tears. He just listened and asked gentle questions. No drama, no grand redemption, just three people talking as if time had paused to give them some quiet. I stood outside the glass, a hand over my heart. I don't know when the tears started, not from pain, but from relief. Relief because I saw a real light, not one stitched from apologies. A light that appears when there's no room left to lie, and the only way forward is to live honestly. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "Maybe people don't change because they're persuaded. They truly change when there's no room left to lie, and then what remains is the truthful part we've hoped for all along." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay still in the dark. Outside, the Santa Fe wind moved through the new trees, leaves whispering. I closed my eyes and, in my dream, walked under a canopy of shade, sunlight dappling through just bright enough to believe, just dim enough to forgive. After more than 2 years of operating with nothing but phones, a few folding tables, and the stubborn will of elders who refused to be quiet, New Dawn Seniors finally had a real office. It was a second-floor room in a red brick building on Cerrillos, old but bright, with windows facing the street, flooded with morning sun and casting long afternoon shadows on the wall. We didn't have a big sign, just a simple whiteboard, New Dawn Seniors, because no one deserves to be silenced. Inside, Agnes and I split shifts with a few new volunteers. Each person had a strength. June handled emergency intake calls, our young staffer Maria entered data, and I took direct counseling and scheduled trainings. Now, every day I heard new stories, some heartbreaking, some oddly funny, all true. I started learning professional storytelling. Not to become a speaker, but to deliver the message, right to hook the heart, hold it with conflict, win empathy with countermoves, and close with transformation. My instructor was a former journalist named Matt, graying hair, warm voice. He said, "Beverly, you're not just telling your story, you're telling a generation's. Every fall you took is a frame someone else will use to stand up." I wrote in my notebook, "Don't tell to be pitied, tell so others know they're not alone." From then on, my talks felt different. People didn't just cry, they left with eyes that knew they could begin again. One day, we got a special case. A 73-year-old woman named Lucille arrived in a wrinkled floral dress, clutching a thick stack of papers. Her voice shook. "My daughter opened credit in my name. I only found out when the bank sent a collection notice. I didn't sign anything." I glanced through her papers, online loan forms, phantom credit cards, transaction addresses matching her daughter's home. Agnes frowned. "This is identity theft. We need to freeze your credit right now." The three of us worked for 3 hours, called the 3 major credit bureaus, filed dispute forms, and drafted a fraud report. Lucille's hand trembled as she signed. She whispered, "I've never reported anyone in my life, but I suppose it's time." I held her hand. "You're not reporting your daughter, you're reporting wrongdoing. Sometimes real love is the act of stopping." 3 weeks later, the bank confirmed the debt was canceled and the case referred for criminal investigation. Lucille sent me a handwritten card. "I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out justice smells like chamomile tea, slow but gentle." I kept that card in my desk. Whenever I got tired, I took it out and read it. That August, I was invited to speak in Albuquerque at a senior council conference. The drive was a bit over 2 hours, and midway my old back pain flared. I pulled over, breathed deep, remembered my doctor's words, "Your body has worked for 70 years, treat it like a friend, not a tool." I rubbed ointment, stretched, drank water, and rested for half an hour. When I got back on the road, I realized I was learning to care for myself without guilt. It was a lesson I'd forgotten through decades of being a mother, a wife, and a fixer of everything. The talk went better than I expected. As I left the stage, a woman hugged me, tears running down. "Mrs. Beverly, your story helped me say out loud that my husband controls every credit card." I thought I was stupid. Now I know I need help. I smiled. No one is stupid for trusting someone they love. All that matters is you start again today. A few weeks later, Marcus wrote. He said he'd finished the impulse control course and had been recommended to join a community tree planting program with nonprofits including New Dawn. "I know you'll hesitate," he wrote, "but I want to do something that's truly useful. Not to be praised, but to work with my own hands." I read the letter and wrestled with it all night. Part of me wanted to refuse, afraid of people's eyes, afraid of feelings that haven't fully healed. But another part understood that learning to trust again is also a kind of healing. The next morning, I called Lieutenant Alvarez to ask her opinion. She said, "If there's supervision and clear rules, there's no reason to refuse. This isn't forgiveness, it's community responsibility." I agreed. Marcus was accepted as a volunteer caring for the trees around our office area, under the supervision of the city's Green Works team. On his first day, he showed up in a reflective vest and gloves. No one said anything. I only said one line. "Here, everyone is a worker. No more, no less." He nodded. "I understand." And for the rest of that day, I watched Marcus work quietly, watering trees, clearing leaves, never looking for my eyes, just working. I realized that sometimes atonement doesn't need words, only labor. In early fall, the local papers ran a long piece. A 70-year-old woman builds a network to stop financial abuse of seniors. Next to it was a photo of me and Agnes in front of our office, with a row of trees Marcus had planted behind us. After the article, our inbox overflowed. Requests for help, thank you notes, urgent stories. One person wrote, "I'm 62, being forced to sign a mortgage, please guide me." Another wrote, "I want to volunteer and learn how to be strong like you." The number of people needing help rose so quickly we had to add more shifts. I decided to hire a part-time financial counselor, a woman who had worked at a bank and retired early. She helped me compile a toolkit called 10 Financial Safety Steps for Older Adults, from how to read statements to setting up secure online banking. We printed hundreds of copies and handed them out for free at markets and workshops. Sometimes people came to the office just to say, "I read it now, I know what to do." Hearing that alone made all the effort worth it. One evening, as I was clearing my desk, a message from Tessa came in. It was a photo of the two kids at their school concert, the girl with a violin, the boy at the drums, smiles so bright they warmed my heart. Below it, Tessa wrote, "Mom, we're okay. Marcus has written to them too. Maybe one day, every wound will become a memory." I printed the photo and tucked it into the journal I keep by my bed. That night, I sat on the balcony, the autumn wind carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. On the street below, warm yellow lights reflected off the red tile roofs of the old row houses. I sat still, hands around a cup of chamomile tea, my heart as light as a page that's just received its final sentence. I thought to myself, peace isn't loud. It arrives like early sunlight on red tiles, quiet, but enough to see that everything around you is still bright. And in that small city, I knew the imperfect chapters of my life had closed to make room for a new one, not dazzling, but true and gentle. 3 years since the day I left San Diego. 3 years since the moment I heard a chair scrape out from under my back and knew that everything in my house, in my life, had been turned upside down. Today, on a fresh Santa Fe morning, New Dawn seniors hosted our biggest workshop yet. The community center hall was packed, over 200 faces, most of them women over 60, people who once believed their voices had lost their value. I stepped onto the wooden podium, mic in hand, under soft lights. Before speaking, I took a deep breath. Sunlight from the windows fell across my hands, the hands that once shook as I signed papers, the hands that were once pulled from my own chair. "I want to begin," I said, "with a story about a chair." The room fell quiet. I told it the day my son yanked a chair from behind me in the middle of a meal in a room that used to be full of laughter. In that moment, I said, I realized that in my own house, I was no longer seen as a person, only as a wallet that could sign. A few people lowered their heads, some wiped away tears. I went on, steady, without bitterness. But that was also the day I started learning the price of freedom. It's not a one-time payment, it's the courage you pay every day. By choosing, by saying no, and by not turning back when others call you selfish. Applause spread scattered at first, then swelling. Like rain falling on land that's been dry for years. Sitting in the back that day was Marcus. He wore the city's volunteer green crew shirt, quiet and within boundaries. No one pointed, and no one asked. Maybe everyone understood. Someone trying to start over doesn't need a pat on the back just to be left in peace. Tessa was in the front row with the two kids. When the talk ended, they ran up and hugged me. The hug was light as breath, not binding, but true to the bone. Marcus came last, keeping a respectful distance, and gave a small nod. I answered with a smile, not bitter, not sweet, just real. A local photographer asked to take a picture. Me, Marcus, Tessa, the two kids stood together under the golden Santa Fe sun. I thought, this is the most honest, if imperfect family photo I've ever had. At the end, I announced the launch of the Early Seed Fund, a new branch of New Dawn to help cover legal fees and finance classes for vulnerable seniors. I spoke slowly. We can't fix the past, but we can help others avoid repeating it. Every donation, every volunteer hour, every shared story, each is a seed. And when one person stands up, the weeds of fear retreat. When I bowed, the hall rose to its feet. The applause rolled like waves, echoing inside my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting something, I was simply living. That evening, after everyone had gone, Nora and I sat on the community center steps. The sky was crystal clear, the stars so bright it felt like we could reach them. 3 years, Nora said, handing me a cup of coffee. Do you remember that night you called me, your voice shaking because you were afraid you wouldn't withdraw the money in time? I laughed, leaning back to look at the sky. I remember. I thought I would die from panic. But now I know I only let the weakest part of me die so the stronger part could live. We counted stars in silence for a while. Softly I said, I haven't grown old for nothing, Nora. She chuckled. Not at all. You're getting younger in the way only those who've lost everything know how to begin. The Santa Fe night wind carried the scent of pine with a hint of dry sand. I took a sip, warmth spreading down into my palms. When I got home, I opened my well-worn journal. On a fresh page, I wrote, I am Beverly Hale, 70 years old. I have learned to say no, and also to say enough to fear. I don't need a perfect ending. I just need to choose to begin each day. I put the pen down and closed the journal. The desk lamp glowed over the new family photo we'd taken that morning. Everyone was smiling, not because every wound had healed, but because we were still here. I looked out the window, desert wind moving through the trees, the rustle of leaves like an old song. Tomorrow, I'll wake up again, make tea, open the office, and answer the calls for help. Tomorrow, I'll begin again. Before I close this story, I want to send you who've walked with me through this long journey a heartfelt thank you. If what I went through made you pause to think about your mother, your father, or simply about the courage it takes when we're forced to choose ourselves, then maybe this story has found its meaning. I would truly love to know where you're watching from and which moment in my journey moved you the most. Please share with me in the comments so I know there are still hearts out there, beating to the rhythm of healing. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and stay with me for new journeys where every wound can bloom if we listen with love and give it time. That morning, when I picked up the phone my daughter-in-law had left on the kitchen table, I wasn't prepared for the screen lighting up with a line of text that froze my blood. Daniel Brooks is calling. Daniel, my husband, who had been buried 6 years ago. Before I could even breathe, another message popped up. Thursday, same time, I can't wait to see you. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone, but instead of panicking, I unlocked the device, something I had never done in my entire life. And what I saw shattered every bit of trust I had held on to through 40 years of marriage. And the worst part was, this was only the beginning. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My kitchen that morning was unsettlingly quiet. The autumn sunlight in Colorado poured through the window, washing over the old oak table. The coffee maker kept dripping softly, and the smell of frozen waffles heating in the oven filled the air. Yet the only scent I could perceive was the cold, metallic tang of fear. I stared at the line, "Daniel Brooks is calling," as if blinking would make it disappear. 6 years ago, I had stood beside his grave, listening to the heavy thud of soil hitting the coffin lid. No one returns from that. My heart pounded so hard my ears rang. My first instinct was to set the phone down immediately and pretend I had never seen anything. I grew up in a generation that didn't touch other people's private belongings, especially not family. Hannah is my daughter-in-law. This phone belonged to her, and I, 70-year-old Eleanor Brooks, had never been the type to pry into anyone's personal life. But the message was still there, shining bright on the screen. "Thursday, same time, I can't wait to see you." "No way," I whispered, my voice cracking. Daniel had died of a heart attack in his basement office. I could still remember how cold his hand felt when the paramedics covered him with the white sheet. I remembered the small funeral at the cemetery outside Denver, the drizzle, the yellow leaves sticking to my shoes, Marcus standing beside me, pale from losing his father. All of those memories crashed back, colliding violently with the absurd text on Hannah's phone screen. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my hands. The iPhone still buzzed, showing the decline and accept options beneath Daniel's name. I didn't dare touch either. I just stood there, staring at the familiar name I thought existed only on a gravestone. The call ended after a few seconds. The screen shifted to the message interface, showing the most recent conversation. I knew I shouldn't do what I was about to do. I knew I was about to break every boundary of privacy I had respected all my life. But something stronger, part wife's instinct, part mother's intuition, pushed me forward. I pressed the home button. The screen lit up, asking for a passcode. 4 digits. Ben's birthday. I had seen Hannah enter that code hundreds of times when she handed the phone to him to play games. My fingers moved almost on their own. The phone unlocked. A soft click sounded in my mind, like the latch of 40 years of marriage being pulled free. The messaging app was right at the top. The first conversation showed only a single letter as its name, D. I tapped it. The newest message was that same Thursday, same time line. I scrolled upward. "Last night was amazing. You always make me forget everything. Marcus is starting to get suspicious. We need to be more careful. The old lady doesn't suspect a thing. She just likes baking and watering flowers." The old lady. They were talking about me. It felt like someone drove a splinter straight into my chest. My hand shook visibly around the phone. I scrolled again. Message after message, half-joking phrases, half-serious arrangements, words of longing, all from the number saved as Daniel Brooks in Hannah's phone. But what made it hard to breathe wasn't the content, it was the timeline. I scrolled higher past rows of gray and blue message bubbles. This year, last year, the year before that. I reached the very beginning and my pulse stopped when I saw the first timestamp, 6 months before Daniel died. I remembered that period vividly. That was when Daniel began going bowling on Thursdays with his friends. He said the doctor told him to get more exercise, go out more, be social. I believed him. I packed him a sandwich, joked, "Don't drink too much beer." Now these messages mocked my trust, one line at a time. I scrolled up and suddenly found a photo. I tapped it open. It showed Hannah smiling, her cheek pressed to a man's face. It was Daniel, or at least the face I had slept beside for 40 years. They stood in front of a wooden window frame, pine trees thick in the background. In one corner I saw a patch of shimmering blue water. A lake somewhere. Hannah held up a wine bottle, mouth open in a laugh. Daniel, no, that man, was looking at her with the expression I once thought belonged only to me. I had never been to that place. We had never vacationed in any cabin with a view like that. Daniel always said he hated the cold, hated forests. Yet there he was, wearing a sweater, standing among pine trees, smiling like a 30-year-old man. Who have I been living with for 40 years? The question crept into my mind, cold as winter air leaking through a doorframe. I swiped to the next picture. This time, Hannah sat on a couch under a thin blanket, and Daniel, or D, sat beside her, his hand tangled in her hair. On the coffee table were ceramic mugs with a floral pattern I had never seen in my house. In the corner of the screen was a tiny line, Pine Hollow Lake Cabin. The phone must have logged the location automatically. Pine Hollow Lake. I had never heard the name, despite living in this state for 30 years. Reality didn't wait for me to catch up. The next photos showed them on a wooden porch, in the snow, in the cabin kitchen cooking together, decorating a Christmas tree. A parallel life I knew nothing about. Each image sliced through my memory, ripping apart every story Daniel had ever told me about another long meeting, poker night with the guys, snowstorm made me late. It's just because she doesn't get me like you do, one message from Hannah said as I scrolled further. She lives in her own little world. Apple pie, church, rose garden. I'm tired of pretending, Dee replied. I saw myself in those words. Apple pies, church, rose garden. I had thought those were the things holding my family together. To them, they were the punchline of a private joke. The sound of a car engine outside jolted me out of the nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. I heard the door, footsteps on the wooden porch. Hannah. She'd come back. In an instant, the numbness shattered. I moved faster than I thought I could. Hit the home button, closed the message app, placed the phone back exactly where it had been, angled the same way. I went back to the sink, picked up a dish towel, and pretended to wipe a plate that had already been clean for hours. The door opened. "Mom, I think I left my phone in here," Hannah called out, her voice as smooth and sweet as always. She always spoke to me in that soft, polite, Midwestern tone, just gentle enough that people outside would say I was lucky to have such a daughter-in-law. "On the table, next to the coffee maker," I answered, surprised that my voice sounded so normal. No shaking, no stumbling. As if I hadn't just read her calling me the old lady in a message to the man using my husband's name. Hannah stepped into the kitchen, her hair tied back, her beige coat still on. She grabbed the phone and dropped it into her purse. "Sorry, I was rushing this morning. Marcus had to be at the job site early, and then Ben forgot his homework." She rambled with a smile, the kind where the corners of her eyes crinkle slightly, a detail I always thought was so endearing. For the first time, I looked at that crinkle and saw a crack in the mask. "I know," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's fine. We all have mornings like that. I'll swing by later with dinner. I have a meeting in town." Hannah said a few more casual things before leaving, her light perfume lingering in the kitchen. As the sound of her car faded, my legs nearly gave out. I dropped into the chair by the dining table, resting my hands flat to stop the trembling. Memories crashed over me. The time Daniel forgot his winter jacket on a snowy night, but insisted he had to meet the guys. The night he came home late smelling like wine, an unfamiliar perfume. The doctor visit he claimed brought good news but left him strangely distant. I had patched all those pieces together into a story. He's tired, he's aging, he needs space. I was the kind of woman raised in church to believe marriage meant patience, sacrifice, and trust. And now the messages, the photos, the Pine Hollow Lake cabin tore it all open. I jolted upright again, this time not from panic, but from something else. The need to know. The need to face whatever monster had been living beneath the surface of my supposedly peaceful life. I thought of Hannah's phone. Now far away on the highway. I wouldn't get another chance to see those messages, but I still had something else. I sat back down, closed my eyes, and forced myself to recall the cabin photo. In the top right corner, a little eye icon. On Ben's iPhone, whenever he showed me pictures of the fish he caught, he always pressed that icon. A little panel popped up showing the location, sometimes even a map. I opened my laptop on the counter, moved the old mouse aside, and typed slowly, Pine Hollow Lake Cabin. Plus my state's name. Dozens of results appeared. Resorts, rental cabins, travel blogs. But among all the colorful ads, one listing made my stomach drop. Pine Hollow Lake, County Road 27, Cedar Ridge County. Cedar Ridge, only a 40-minute drive from our ranch. I stared at the screen for a long time. It felt like looking at a door I knew would destroy everything behind me if I opened it, yet leaving it closed would destroy me just the same. If I didn't face this, I would spend the rest of my life asking, what really happened to my life? In the window's reflection, I saw a silver-haired woman, shoulders slightly hunched, wearing an old apron. For 40 years, I had been the wife in the kitchen, the mother behind the scenes, the grandmother with cookies ready every afternoon. No one had ever taught me what to do when a dead husband rang my daughter-in-law's phone. But one thing was clear. I would not let Marcus learn this from someone else. If anyone was going to protect my son from the truth, it would be me. If anyone was going to face the ghost named Daniel Brooks, it would also be me. I closed the laptop, my palms damp with sweat. In my mind, one thought took shape so clearly it felt like words. I will go to Pine Hollow Lake. I will see what happened behind my back, even if it destroys everything left. At least it will destroy it on the foundation of truth. And that was when I understood. The phone call that morning wasn't just a call from the dead. It was a summons into a part of my life I never thought I would have to face. A place where my husband, my daughter-in-law, and even I were no longer the polite characters we had pretended to be for so many years. I stood there for a long time after deciding to go to Pine Hollow Lake, but my feet carried me somewhere else. Before going there, I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining things. That grief and loneliness hadn't twisted my mind. At least that's what I told myself. And so, instead of grabbing my car, keys, I turned toward the staircase leading to the basement, where Daniel had spent most of his life working. The basement always smelled of old paper, pine wood, and the laundry detergent Daniel loved. Warm yellow light shone over the broad desk that took up most of the room, highlighting stacks of books and boxes of documents, things I usually left untouched because Daniel liked organizing them himself. He always said, "Let me handle the paperwork. You just take care of the garden and the boy." Looking back now, that sentence felt like a locked door I had allowed Daniel to close behind himself. I opened each drawer, starting with the top where he kept his pens. A few ballpoint pens, a black notebook, some unpaid bills. Nothing unusual. The second drawer had insurance files. The same medical records, farm documents, tractor repair invoices. All normal, all ordinary enough to make my unease grow. It felt like the truth was deliberately hiding. Then I opened the bottom drawer. It felt heavier than the others, as if something was stuck behind it. I crouched down and pulled harder. A sharp click sounded. The drawer slid open, revealing a hidden compartment underneath, a false bottom. I forgot to breathe. Inside was a bundle of envelopes tied with twine, several kitchen receipts that didn't match our household expenses, and a stack of papers that looked strange. Some pages bore Daniel's name, others had only signatures with no identifying information. There were receipts from stores I'd never heard of in towns Daniel claimed he never had a reason to visit. When I pulled the papers out, something heavy fell onto the tile floor. I bent down to pick it up. It was a small wooden box, dark brown, simply carved, aged so heavily I had to brush the dust off to see the details. Daniel wasn't sentimental. He liked things clean, open, uncluttered. This little box did not fit him, and that was exactly why my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs. I lifted the first one. My heart clenched immediately. There was Hannah, younger by a few years, radiant, her blonde hair falling over one shoulder. In the picture, she leaned into a man. The man had Daniel's eyes, Daniel's jaw, Daniel's smile. So similar it felt like the floor beneath me shifted. I laid out the second, the third, the fourth. Each captured intimate moments. Standing in front of the cabin, dining by a fireplace, laughing together in a small restaurant I had never heard Daniel mention. But the most suffocating detail was the dates, year after year after year. The affair stretched like a film reel with no beginning and no ending. I once believed Daniel led only one life, the one I built with him. His expression when he proposed under the lights at Denver's Square, the way he held me in the hospital after my mother's surgery, the joy on his face when Marcus was born, all of it suddenly felt fragile. Not because I thought he never loved me, but because I now saw he might have lived two lives at once, and I had been given only half. Blinking back tears, I reached the bottom of the box. A folded document lay there. I opened it. It was the ownership certificate for the Pine Hollow Lake cabin. Owner, Daniel Brooks. Status, active. I remembered clearly when Daniel claimed he had sold that cabin. A small property his brother had left him. He said maintenance cost too much, that he had no time to go there anymore. I had believed him. I even felt relieved, thinking he wanted to spend more time with family. Now that certificate sat in my hand like a massive unanswered question. Why did Daniel lie? What was the cabin for? Who had lived there with him? And what truly happened 6 years ago? I kept one photo. Hannah touching Daniel's neck, her eyes looking at him like the world had shrunk to just them. I didn't keep it to torment myself. I kept it so I wouldn't forget wouldn't downplay, wouldn't allow myself to pretend this could all be a misunderstanding. People forget pain. Evidence does not. I put the box back, returned the documents to their places, wiped the desk so I wouldn't leave traces. As I straightened up, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Marcus. "Mom, you down here?" His voice was low, tired, the voice of a man carrying his family on his back. My heart jolted so hard I had to press a hand against my chest. "Yes, honey. I was just looking for some old tax papers. I think I misplaced them somewhere." Marcus stepped into the room and glanced at Daniel's desk. He had no idea that right beneath his hand was a secret capable of destroying every memory he had of his father. "Did you find it yet, Mom? Let me look for it." He reached toward the bottom drawer. I nearly lunged forward to stop him. "No need, I already found it. Everything's done." Marcus seemed a little surprised by how quickly I reacted, but he just nodded, asked a few questions about dinner, about Hannah's work, then went back upstairs. When his footsteps faded, I had to grip the edge of the desk just to stay standing. My fear wasn't only for what Daniel had done, but for what might happen if Marcus learned this truth in the cruelest way possible. When I looked back around Daniel's room, everything suddenly changed. The chair he used when writing letters, the leather jacket he hung behind the door, the Colorado map marked with his favorite fishing spots. All of it had become props in a play I didn't know I'd been watching. And then a thought, light as a breath but sharp as a blade, cut across my mind. Hannah knew this room better than I thought. The marks on the drawer, the way the papers were arranged, the carelessness of leaving photo metadata exposed. All of it made me certain she had been in here more than once. I didn't know what Hannah and Daniel had shared with each other, but they had clearly shared far more than I ever knew. I looked at the wall clock. The minute hand had just passed the 6. It was barely near 10 a.m. If I left right now, I could reach Pine Hollow Lake before noon. There was no reason to hesitate. No answers were left in this house. I took a long breath, walked quickly up the stairs, grabbed my car keys, and pulled on a warm coat. When I opened the front door, a blast of cold wind rushed in, carrying the faint scent of young pine. Winter in Colorado always arrived sooner than expected, just like the truth I was about to face. I would go to that cabin, alone. Whatever waited for me there, at least I would no longer be living in the dark. I drove out of town, leaving behind the familiar streets leading to the church, the small grocery and the bakery I had gone to for 30 years. The farther I went, the more the landscape changed. Thick lines of pine trees, deep green crowns pressed together along the hillsides, the ground covered with a soft carpet of fallen leaves. The road to Pine Hollow Lake wound through the forest, narrow enough that 2 cars passing each other would struggle. The map told me I had 12 minutes left. I rolled the window down a little. The cold air swept in, carrying the smell of earth, pine resin, and the damp scent of the nearby lake. My heart pounded with each beat, not only from fear, but from the feeling of someone about to touch a truth they had avoided all their life. When the cabin appeared among the tall trees, I braked slowly. It didn't look like an abandoned hideout. It looked cared for. New wooden roof, windows clean of dust, steps swept neatly. A metal wind chime hung by the door, ringing softly whenever the wind passed, a gentle sound that made my chest tighten. I parked the car a few miles away and followed a side trail to avoid being seen. As I neared the porch, I stood still for a few seconds, listening. No voices, no cars, only the rustle of leaves. I placed my hand on the doorknob. The wooden door opened easily as if the owner had just stepped out. Inside was warmer than I expected. Natural light from the windows washed over the small room, a beige sofa, a Navajo-patterned rug, a coffee table with a few old magazines. I stepped in and immediately saw the first sign. A bottle of red wine left unfinished on the table, with 2 glasses beside it. Hannah. And who else? I walked to the wall hooks by the door. A long cream-colored woman's coat hung at arm's reach. I touched the fabric. New, clean. A faint scent of perfume. The same vanilla amber blend Hannah always wore. I opened the small closet next to it. Inside were a travel bag, scarves, toiletries. All the things Hannah carried whenever she left the house. So this wasn't a hidden meeting place abandoned after Daniel died. It was where Hannah was living part of her life. I swallowed hard and lifted my eyes to the shelf above. Something there made me grip the edge to steady myself. A row of men's coats, the exact style Daniel liked, the exact size Daniel wore. And when I leaned closer, the faint scent of the detergent only he used still lingered. I had to push the closet door aside to keep from falling. Daniel, what did you hide from me? I froze when I saw a picture frame lying face down at the bottom of the closet. My hand trembled as I flipped it over. The photo showed Hannah smiling brightly, her face glowing in the lake sunlight. Beside her stood a man. His face was familiar enough to make my stomach twist. It was Daniel, but it wasn't. He looked older, his hair more gray, and there was a small scar across his right eyebrow. A scar my husband never had, but the build, the smile, the look in his eyes. Similar enough that the line between the dead and the living blurred. I stepped back, setting the frame onto the chair before my hand gave out. If this man wasn't Daniel, then who was he? And if he was Daniel, then who had we buried? A distant car engine made my heart leap. I rushed to the back door, moving on instinct, like someone running from a ghost rising out of their past. My heart thrashed wildly, my breath ragged. I pulled the back door shut and crouched behind the woodpile. Through a sliver between the boards, I saw a man step onto the cabin porch. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his walk. God. That walk made me want to cry. Each step, each slight shoulder movement as he took off his hat. It was Daniel's. Exactly Daniel's. Every piece of logic inside me crumbled. I was dragged back to the last day of Daniel's life. Or what I thought was his last day. The way he walked down the stairs, the way he straightened Marcus's collar before an interview, the quick kiss he gave me before saying, "I'll be home early." The man opened the cabin door with a key. No hesitation, no fear. I saw the jawline, the broad shoulders, the slight lean to the right. Something only Daniel had, but the small scar on his right eyebrow was still there. Daniel never had a scar. I understood then. I was looking at a man both familiar enough to hurt and strange enough to terrify. In that moment, everything I knew about my marriage collapsed and rebuilt itself into a darker shape. If Daniel wasn't the only one with that face, if there was someone else who looked exactly like him, then I had never truly known the man I married. I couldn't watch anymore. My emotions stormed violently. Fear, grief, disbelief. I stumbled backward toward the trail, nearly tripping as I climbed the small incline. My ears rang, my face flushed like fever, my heart pounding so fiercely I had to press a hand to my chest to keep from collapsing. I got into the car and locked the doors, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel as my breathing slowly steadied. Each heartbeat felt like a cruel question. Was Daniel alive? Or was I looking at his twin brother? Someone Daniel had never mentioned? Or was this some elaborate impersonation to hide something even darker? None of the questions had answers yet, but one thing was clear. If I walked away now, I would never forgive myself. I needed to know. I needed to see the truth from more than one angle, not just through a rushed visit. And so, before leaving Pine Hollow Lake, I opened the trunk and took out a small bag of miscellaneous items. I found what I needed, a compact camera Marcus once bought me to record my garden. I would return to the cabin that night. I would place a camera where it could capture everything that happened inside. The truth was no longer something I feared. It was the only thing I had left. The next afternoon, when the sun dipped behind the pines, I drove back to Pine Hollow Lake with a newly purchased hidden camera in my coat pocket. I'd spent all morning finding the smallest, clearest, longest lasting model, one that could expose the truth without anyone knowing. The salesman asked if I planned to film wildlife or neighbors, and I only smiled. If he knew what I was going back to record, he might not have dared sell it to me. At the cabin, I turned off my headlights from a distance and walked along the tree line just like before. But this time, I wasn't trembling like prey being hunted. I had a purpose, and that gave me strength. The back door was the same. The hinge clicked softly unless lifted just right. I stepped inside, taking a steadying breath to push past the warm scent of wood and lingering human presence. I chose a spot on the bookshelf to place the camera between two paperback novels. The angle was wide enough to capture the living room, the front door, and part of the hallway. I adjusted it a few times before snapping the camouflage cover into place. Then I connected it to my phone and checked the signal. The light blinked once, then stayed steady. Perfect. I left the cabin while a faint gold edge of sunlight still touched the treetops. As I closed the back door, my hand hesitated. A small voice whispered, "After today, your life will never be peaceful again." I shook it off and walked quickly to the car. Peace had been taken from me years ago. I just hadn't realized it yet. The camera reported movement the next morning. My phone buzzed 3 times in a row, enough to nearly spill my coffee. I opened the screen, my heart pounding like I'd sprinted a mile. The image appeared. The cabin door swung open. Hannah walked in. Hair tied back, black coat carrying a small suitcase and a bouquet of fresh flowers, white chrysanthemums, the same kind Daniel used to like arranging in our living room. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Hannah set the suitcase on the chair, then adjusted the table runner as if she had been the homeowner for years. She moved around the room, picking up small things, opened a window to let the breeze in. Every gesture was so natural it couldn't be mistaken. She lived here, not just visited for an affair. An hour later, another motion alert came through. I tapped the screen with such force I nearly hit the wrong icon. The image of the man entering the cabin made my blood run cold. That walk, that light gray t-shirt Daniel used to wear while working in the yard, that familiar gesture running a hand through his hair while taking off his hat. Hannah ran to him, hugging him like she had found the love of her life. They kissed, deeply, passionately, the kind of passion Daniel hadn't shown me in at least 10 years. He said something. Hannah laughed, placing her hand on his chest. They stood close, familiar, effortless. Then he reached up and brushed her cheek. Exactly the way Daniel brushed my hair when I had a headache in 1998. They held hands and walked into the bedroom, disappearing from view. I shut off the screen. If I didn't, I would have thrown up. My kitchen suddenly felt foreign. The floor tilted, my spine chilled. I braced myself on the counter, trying to breathe, but each inhale felt knife-like. If that man wasn't Daniel, then why did he have all of Daniel's habits? And if he was Daniel, why had he chosen to live with the woman who destroyed our son's marriage? More importantly, what had he done to vanish from our lives? But no matter the answer, one thing was certain. I couldn't sit back anymore. I had to confront them. I was just about to call Hannah when my phone rang. Marcus. His voice was cheerful. "Hey, Mom, can I come for dinner tonight? I want to ask you about Dad's tax files. And, have you heard anything from Hannah? She's been acting strange." I swallowed the pain rising in my throat and answered as calmly as I could. "Sure, honey, come over. I'll make your favorite." I didn't know how to talk to my son while holding a truth that could reduce his heart to ashes. But I also knew I couldn't let Marcus fall into this nightmare before I understood everything myself. All day, even while cooking, my eyes kept drifting toward the phone. No more alerts. The cabin was quiet while I played the role of calm mother for Marcus. He talked about work, the neighbors, the little boy across the street learning to ride a bike. I nodded, smiled, asked the right questions, all while feeling like an empty shell. My mind stayed in the cabin. The shutting door, Hannah's laughter, that man's silhouette cutting into my heart with each image. I walked Marcus to the door and watched his car disappear behind the maple trees. As the gate closed, my face finally collapsed. I went upstairs, grabbed my coat, shoved my keys into my pocket. I knew what I was about to do wasn't safe, wasn't wise, but I had no other choice. If I didn't face them now, I never would. I drove into the night, following the same road to Pine Hollow Lake. Tonight the cabin would no longer be just a hiding place for secrets. It would be the place where I forced the truth to show its face. I pulled over on the hillside, turned off the engine, and let the night swallow every sound around me. Pine Hollow Lake stretched out in the distance, a dark mirror reflecting the pale silver moonlight. Every step I took down the dirt path made the pine needles crackle beneath my shoes, as if the forest itself were warning me, "Turn back." But I didn't turn back. I had gone too far to still fear the truth. As I approached the cabin porch, I heard music drifting from inside. Soft, slow, deep as an old wound. Frank Sinatra. "The Way You Look Tonight." The song Daniel used to play whenever our family had dinner on the porch. The song he played the night before Marcus's wedding. The song he once said meant, "You're always the most beautiful to me, even when you're angry." Hearing that melody now made my heart clench painfully. I drew a breath, raised my hand, and knocked. 3 knocks. Not loud, but enough to tighten every muscle in my chest. The music inside stopped abruptly, then footsteps. Slow, heavy, as if the person inside were trying to guess who stood out there. The door opened, and I saw him. It took me several seconds before I remembered how to breathe. That face, that jawline, those eyes, that familiar furrowed brow. All of it was Daniel, but also not. The man standing in front of me was older than Daniel had been at the time of his death 6 years ago. His hair was grayer, and there was a thin, sharp scar across his left eyebrow. Daniel had never had a scar there. He froze when he saw me. His eyes widened. Not the polite surprise of seeing a stranger, but the horror of someone who had just seen the ghost of his own past. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice, dear God, almost identical to Daniel's, but slightly deeper with a faint rasp Daniel never had. Before I could answer, Hannah appeared behind him. She was wearing a pale blue shirt, the exact one Daniel had worn on our 30th anniversary trip. I recognized the stitching on the cuff immediately. I was the one who'd repaired it when it frayed. Hannah saw me and her face turned bone white. "Oh my God," she gasped. She stepped back, gripping the doorframe as if afraid she might fall. I stepped onto the porch, my voice calmer than I understood, as if the shock had drained me of the ability to tremble. "Looks like I'm interrupting." The man moved to stand protectively in front of Hannah, as if shielding her. That gesture made my blood heat, not from jealousy, but from sheer wrongness. What I was looking at was a replay of a life I thought had been buried 6 years ago. "Who are you?" I repeated, this time without flinching. The man swallowed, inhaled slowly. "I'm Richard Hale," he said, eyes still fixed on me. "I am Daniel's twin brother." The air around me exploded into silence, a single sentence capable of erasing 40 years of marriage. Daniel had no siblings. I answered firmly. I married him. I knew his family from top to bottom. Richard lowered his head, not arguing, not denying. "You knew what he wanted you to know. Daniel was adopted as a baby. I wasn't. We were separated at birth." I stood still, as if nailed to the wooden floor. Daniel was adopted? Daniel hid that from me? Why? Dozens of questions pounded inside my skull. Richard continued. "Daniel found me 6 years ago when he was diagnosed with a severe heart condition. He needed information about his biological family, and I was fighting a malignant blood disorder. Daniel saved me. He donated marrow. He's the reason I'm alive." Hannah was standing upright now, but her face remained ghostly pale. She looked at me, her eyes shimmering. Not with remorse, I saw that clearly, but with fear. "I know you saw the phone," Hannah said, her voice trembling, "and yes, I did have an affair with Daniel." The words cut like a knife, even though I had already known the truth. Hearing them from her mouth made the pain double. "For 6 years after he died, you still messaged him," I said coldly. "Or at least, someone using his number." Hannah glanced at Richard. Richard looked down, his hands tightening into fists. I stepped into the cabin without being invited, my anger far past the point of politeness. "Explain all of it. I want to hear everything." Hannah clasped her hands together, as if trying to hold herself steady. "Daniel, before he died, he was planning to leave you. Leave Marcus. Leave everything. He wanted to abandon his life and start a new one with me." I went numb. Not because Daniel cheated. I had already survived that shock 3 times over these past days, but because he wanted to leave my son, leave his grandson, leave everything that bore the name family. Richard added, as if wanting to clarify every broken layer. Daniel planned to fake his death. He wanted me to take his identity and disappear with Hannah. He said he couldn't stand the life he was living. "But he died for real," Hannah cut in, her voice cracking. "Right in my arms. The heart attack came sooner than he expected. The plan wasn't carried out, but the consequences still remained." The cabin fell silent. No wind, no lake sounds, only my heartbeat, heavy, violent, as if my entire past were collapsing beneath my feet. Finally I spoke, slowly but razor sharp. "So that means I mourned a man who had already planned to leave me." Richard closed his eyes as if he too felt pain from the truth. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know until it was too late." Hannah didn't apologize. She just lowered her head, like someone who knew her guilt could no longer be hidden, but who lacked the courage to show true remorse. I looked at them, the 2 people standing in the life Daniel intended to choose instead of mine, and I asked myself, what value did 40 years of marriage truly hold? But I didn't cry. I had used up all my tears during those days watching the camera footage. Here, in the cabin where Daniel had lived his second life, all I had left was cold clarity. And I knew tonight was not the night all truths would be revealed, but it was the night I would begin reclaiming the life those people had tried to erase me from. I stood in the cabin's living room, hearing their words as the air thickened around me. Part of me wanted to cover my ears, to stop absorbing any more of it, but I had come here for the truth, and truth is never gentle. Hannah spoke first. Her voice was small but steady, as if she had finally set down the boulder crushing her chest. Daniel had several heart attacks before he died, she said, unable to meet my eyes, but he hid it from everyone, from Marcus, from you. I didn't know if I was shaking from cold or rage. Daniel, the man whose blood pressure pills I set out every morning, hid a heart condition? He said he just needed to get through a few more months, Hannah went on. He said, when I disappear, no one will have to take care of me anymore. I saw Richard close his eyes, as if hearing a memory he hated. Disappear? I repeated, each syllable falling heavy onto the wooden floor. Yes, Hannah whispered. Daniel's plan was to fake his death, or at least vanish from this life. You have to understand, he believed he was about to die from heart disease anyway. He didn't want to wait for it. He wanted to go out on his own terms. The room spun in my vision. Daniel wanted to die with Hannah beside him, not me. But Hannah kept talking, compelled by a force I couldn't understand. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. That day, he had worse symptoms. We were discussing the details, timing, method, transferring the insurance money to Richard. And then he collapsed. Hannah brought her hand to her mouth, her voice breaking. I panicked. I didn't call 911 right away. The world dropped out from under me. I had to grab the back of a chair. Richard spoke, his voice low and rough. Hannah said Daniel wanted to go quietly, that he had accepted his death, but he looked at me, his eyes painfully honest. You and I both know that doesn't justify not calling for help. You let him die, I whispered, my lips so dry it hurt to speak. You let him die. Hannah sobbed, choking on her words. I thought if I waited just a few more minutes, what Daniel wanted would become true. I was wrong. I didn't understand he still had hope to live. I turned away. I couldn't look at her another second. Then Hannah's voice softened. After Daniel died, I remembered the plan he'd mentioned about Richard receiving the life insurance and leaving with me. So I called Richard to tell him. Richard's hands tightened until his knuckles whitened. I refused. I was sick, still in treatment. And that plan, my God, what kind of morality would allow me to do that? I told Hannah not to contact me again. I looked at him, and for the first time, sensed something genuine in his tone. Hannah continued, but then Richard recovered. A strange miracle. After 2 years, he was completely healthy. Daniel always said something about the twin bond between them, that they could save each other, and it turned out to be true. Richard rubbed his forehead, exhaling heavily. After I got better, I went to see Hannah, to thank Daniel for saving me. And then we continued the relationship that had been left unfinished. No Daniel, no marrow donation, just two people who had lost too much and clung to each other to survive. I felt like I was standing inside a story that had never included me. Hannah wiped her tears and looked straight at me. We didn't want you to know, or Marcus, or little Ben. Daniel had already caused enough damage. We just wanted to start over. I let out a laugh, hollow, sharp, more brutal than anything I could have said. Start over? I repeated. After tearing my family apart from the ground up? After sleeping with my husband, then with his brother? After letting Daniel die on a wooden floor instead of calling for help? Hannah bit her lip, her face pale as ash. Richard stood still, like someone accepting judgment he couldn't escape, even though he hadn't committed the worst part of the story. I turned and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me, maybe because they knew nothing they said could fix what they had done. The freezing night wind struck my face as I stepped off the cabin porch. In the darkness, Pine Hollow Lake lay perfectly still, a mirror reflecting the truth inside me, shattered, desolate, tangled in betrayal, regret, and an emptiness without a name. Daniel betrayed me while he was alive, and even his death was a betrayal. I walked back to my car, my chest tight as if someone were squeezing my lungs. The night was pitch black, but I could still see the path, because every cell in me was burning with a pain too sharp to look away from. I opened the car door, sat down, and clutched the steering wheel. "Daniel," I whispered, "what did you do to us?" I didn't start the engine. I just sat there. In the quiet night, the cabin in the distance was still lit, warm yellow light, soft, peaceful to the point of cruelty. And I, the woman who had shared 40 years of life with Daniel, walked away from it with a heart so broken I no longer recognized myself. I drove home through a night that felt endless. The only thought that flickered in my mind, not Daniel, not Richard, was Hannah. Her face when she confessed, the way she dodged responsibility, the way she stood in that cabin wearing the exact shirt I had once stitched for my husband. A part of me wanted to do something truly cruel, something that would make her understand what it feels like to have your heart shattered by betrayal. I imagined slipping a bottle of strong sedatives into the Merlot Hannah always drank every night. Just a small amount, enough to knock her out, make her lose control, make her shake with fear, but not endanger her life. Just so she'd know my pain could leave marks too. The thought slowed my breathing. A coldness spread from the back of my neck down my spine. I, a woman who once believed in forgiveness, was thinking about revenge. But then the images of Marcus and Ben came to me, so clear it felt like the two of them were sitting right there in the back seat. Marcus, with those eyes always waiting for me to smile. Ben, my grandson, who always wrapped his arms around my leg when he got sleepy. If I hurt Hannah, even just to scare her, everything would come back down on my own family, and those two innocent souls would bear the consequences in her place. I let my hands fall from the steering wheel and leaned my head against the seat for a long minute. No, I couldn't turn myself into someone like them, but I also couldn't let them live peacefully as if nothing had happened. A few days later, at our usual family dinner at my house, I returned with the calmest appearance I could manage. I made roasted chicken, steamed corn, and pudding, Ben's favorite. Marcus and Hannah arrived on time. When Hannah stepped into the kitchen to help me set the plates, I glanced quickly at her face. She avoided my eyes, something Marcus never noticed. During dinner, Marcus cheerfully talked about work. Ben ran circles around the table with his toy car in hand. Only Hannah was unusually quiet. Every time I opened my mouth to ask something, she jumped like someone who had brushed against an electric wire. I set my glass down and smiled as if I were just making small talk. "Are you two doing well lately, Hannah? Work, marriage, everything still going smoothly?" Marcus kept scooping corn for Ben, not noticing anything, but Hannah froze. Her eyes locked onto mine with a panic only I could see. I curled my lips, not a smile, but a warning unspoken. I know everything. That was the message I sent her with my eyes, and she understood, immediately. Her face drained of color, her lips quivered even though she tried to force a weak smile. "Yes, we're fine," she said softly, staring down at her plate like she wanted to crawl into it. My trap wasn't poison. It was the truth lying silently between us. After Marcus took Ben to bathe, I stood, wiped my hands on a towel, and said quietly, "Hannah, help me in the kitchen for a moment." She followed me, every step like she was walking into an interrogation room instead of my vanilla-scented kitchen. I turned, leaned against the counter, and looked straight at her. No yelling, no crying, no anger. That calmness made her shake more than any scream could. "I'll keep the secret," I said, each word measured and clear. "Marcus will never know. If you don't make him find out—" Hannah opened her mouth but couldn't produce a sound. I continued, "But if my son suffers one more drop of pain because of you, just one, I swear I'll expose everything. I have photos, videos, confessions. I'll let Marcus see all of it himself." Hannah stepped back, her lips trembling violently. I'll leave Marcus," she whispered. "I promise I'll leave, quietly, without hurting anyone, I swear." I looked straight into her eyes, not to judge her sincerity, but to make sure she understood I was no longer the gentle, easily wounded woman I used to be. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Power. Not the power to destroy someone. The power of someone who holds the truth. Someone who can protect her family from the worst. Someone who decides who gets to remain in this story. And who must leave it. When Hannah lowered her head, avoiding my gaze, mumbling her promise to disappear quietly, I realized that for the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one holding the scale. And that feeling, painful as it was, still made me stand taller, breathe deeper, and know that the rest of my life would be guided by no one but myself. A month passed slowly, as if time itself were watching to see whether I would keep my promise. Hannah avoided me completely but kept her calm facade around Marcus, until the night she walked into my house, sat across from me, and announced in an even voice, "I want to divorce Marcus, because we no longer share the same views." I looked at her, saying nothing, just observing. That calmness that was too practiced. Those eyes trying to appear innocent while always avoiding mine. The way she lifted her glass without her hand trembling, as if everything were a calculated decision. Marcus didn't have that kind of calm. When he heard the news, it was like watching someone fall from a rooftop onto cold concrete. His shoulders collapsed instantly. The same way Daniel looked 30 years ago when he learned he'd lost his job. But Marcus didn't yell, didn't blame, didn't demand answers. He just repeated one sentence, his voice cracking. "If that's what she wants, I have to respect it." I wanted to hold my son, to tell him the truth, to tell him none of this was his fault, that Hannah's heart had belonged somewhere else, to someone else, for a long time. But I had to grit my teeth. The promise I had made in that kitchen still wrapped around my chest like a binding strap. I would keep the secret, if she didn't hurt Marcus further. Divorce, painful as it was the least harmful outcome. Hannah moved out in just 3 days, never looked back once, left nothing behind except a neatly folded divorce paper on Marcus's dining table. What shocked me wasn't that she left, but where she went, She didn't move back to her parents' house or to a temporary place. She, moved to Arizona with Richard, a pair built on secrets, a pair connected by Daniel's death, a pair whose very existence was enough to tear my family apart. Ben was different. He was only 6, his eyes wide with confusion as he watched his mother pack. "Mommy's gonna work far away, Grandma?" he asked, hugging my leg. I looked at Marcus. He bit his lip before answering gently. "Yes, Mom has to work somewhere new, but she still loves you." Half true, half false, more painful than the whole truth. I held my grandson, feeling his heartbeat against my chest, and reminded myself that every decision I made was to protect these small souls from the shock adults had created. Marcus tried to be strong, but I saw the emptiness in his eyes every morning when he held his coffee. I comforted him with familiar phrases. "You'll be okay. Everything happens for a reason." But inside me, a storm roared. I was the only one in the house who knew the truth, and the only one who had to carry it like a sharp stone lodged in my heart. Some nights, sitting alone by the fireplace watching the flames flicker, I asked myself, did Daniel ever truly love me? That question would never have an answer. On Daniel's Memorial Day that year, I prepared white roses and cleaned his photo in the living room, just like I did every year. But that morning, when I opened the door, I saw a large wreath sitting on the steps. From Richard, with gratitude. I froze. A message of gratitude left at my door. The home where Daniel lived with me for 40 years, where I cried for him more times than I could count. That wreath was a blade twisted straight into my chest. Richard hadn't entered our lives as family. He entered through a secret that shattered my marriage. He had no right to leave anything on my doorstep. Not on the day I remembered Daniel, not after everything that had happened. I carried the wreath to the backyard. I set it in the fire pit I used to burn fallen leaves every month, and I lit it. Flames rose, swallowing each petal as if devouring the past I'd clung to for too long. The scent of burning flowers drifted into the air, sweet, scorched, bitter, like a cleansing ritual. I watched until the wreath became ash. This is the line. I told myself, I will not let anyone use Daniel's name to hurt me again. A few weeks later, Marcus began to heal. He fixed up the porch, took Ben to basketball practice, started going to the gym, things he had never done while living with Hannah. I watched my son slowly regain his smile, a tired smile but real. Then one day I saw him hesitating at the door, holding a bouquet of white daisies. "Mom," he said softly, "I met someone, Claire. She teaches at Ben's school." I saw the light return to his eyes, a light he had lost for too long. "That's wonderful," I said, stepping forward to straighten his collar like I did when he was 8. "You deserve a new happiness." He laughed shyly. I smiled too, but deep inside, one worry remained. Marcus was rebuilding his life. On ground I knew held a buried secret, a grave named Daniel, and everything he had done. I could only hope that secret would never come back one day to ruin the life Marcus had pieced back together with his broken heart. I had believed, or hoped, that once Hannah left Marcus's life, everything would fade into the past, that I could box the secret away, place it in a mental drawer, and close it. But secrets never die. They only change shape. And its new shape was Hannah and Richard's strange desire to appear publicly as a new family. I learned this when Hannah texted me a week before Ben's birthday. "We would like to come. For Ben. I hope you understand." I understood. I understood that they felt no shame. But I also understood that if I refused, Marcus would start asking questions. And I had promised to protect my son from the cruel truth. So on Ben's 7th birthday, when I saw a black SUV pull up in front of the house, my heart dropped to the floor. Hannah stepped out first, lightly made up, looking dignified in a way that felt false. Richard stepped out right after, tall, composed, polite, and so much like Daniel that I had to grip the back of a chair to keep myself steady. It didn't matter how many times I reminded myself that he was not Daniel. My body still reacted as if seeing a dead man return. During the party, Richard behaved like the perfect gentleman, courteous, kind, tactful. He bowed his head slightly to me. "Mrs. Brooks, thank you for letting us come." I nodded, swallowing down the surge rising in my chest. That voice, deeper, rougher, but still carrying Daniel's tone. If I closed my eyes, I could imagine myself standing in front of my husband again. I did not allow myself to close my eyes. Marcus looked at Richard a few seconds longer than usual, then laughed. "You look familiar. Have we met somewhere before?" My entire body froze. Hannah, standing behind him, visibly flinched, but Richard, with a calmness that was almost frightening, simply smiled. "I just have one of those common faces." Marcus laughed, not thinking anything of it. He was busy organizing the ball toss game for Ben and the neighborhood kids, but I couldn't breathe normally anymore. When it was time to cut the cake, everyone gathered in the front yard. Ben ran around with his birthday hat, smiling bright like a little sun. And then, as if by instinct, he ran straight to Richard. "Do you know how to ride a horse? At school, I saw on TV some people riding horses on a big ranch." Richard smiled, bent down to Ben's eye level. "Of course. I used to live on a small ranch with..." He hesitated. "With someone very special." In that exact moment, my heart went wild. Daniel used to teach Marcus to ride horses at my parents' small ranch. That story was supposed to be a private memory of our family. Ben tilted his head. "Grandpa taught Daddy to ride horses. You knew about that too?" I stepped forward, almost by reflex, and cut him off. "Ben, come here and blow the candles." I couldn't allow any thread to connect Richard to Daniel, couldn't let Ben sense that frightening familiarity. Children notice things far sharper than adults realize. When the party wound down and guests began leaving, I was cleaning up the plastic plates when Hannah walked over, standing by the kitchen door, her eyes fixed on the floor. You're still keeping your promise, right?" she asked softly. I set the tray down and looked straight into her eyes. No anger anymore, just a cold exhaustion. "I have kept it," I said, "and Marcus still doesn't know anything." Hannah bit her lip. "Please, don't say anything. We just want to live peacefully." I let out a short, almost humorless laugh. "Peacefully? After everything that's been done?" She bowed her head, not arguing. "Just, please don't ruin our new life. We need a chance to start over." I didn't answer, because I knew, and she knew, that the plea had no foundation. Nothing built on deception can ever be peaceful. As they were leaving, Richard turned back and gave me one last look. That gaze, those eyes shaped like Daniel's, cut straight through me like a reminder. I'm still here. I still exist in your family whether you want it or not. And I understood something more clearly than ever. My family would never escape their shadows. Not Hannah, not Richard, and not Daniel, the man who ruined his own life and then left the pieces in someone else's hands. The secret I carried, the secret about Daniel's death, the betrayal, the planned escape, could no longer stay quiet. It was like a wild beast trapped in my chest, silent, dangerous, and just waiting for the smallest crack to break loose. As I watched their car disappear behind the row of pines, I whispered to myself, "How long until that secret climbs out of its grave?" I knew the answer. Soon. Very soon. Because ghosts never really leave. They just stand behind us waiting for us to turn around. Ben began asking the first questions one afternoon that seemed peaceful. He was sitting on the living room floor building a tiny ranch out of wooden blocks, with a horse stall, a fence, even a little well he made using a bottle cap as a roof. I was folding towels on the chair when Ben suddenly looked up, his big round eyes full of a strange realization. "Grandma, did you know Mr. Richard before?" My hands froze mid-air. "Why would you ask that?" Ben shrugged, kept stacking the blocks, but his voice stayed uncertain. "Because Mr. Richard looks like somebody. I don't remember who, but a lot. Like, I've seen him before." My stomach dropped. A 6-year-old doesn't lie the way adults do. They just speak whatever their mind can't make sense of. And the familiarity Ben felt, that was exactly what I had feared. I forced a soft smile. "Maybe you're just confused, Ben. Grown-ups all look a little alike. You know that." Ben tilted his head, thinking. "But he talked about a ranch, just like Grandpa did when he told Daddy stories." I felt as if someone had tied a rope around my chest and pulled tight. Even though I'd prepared for months, I didn't expect the day to come so quickly. The day a child started noticing pieces that didn't belong together. I put my hand on Ben's shoulder and squeezed gently. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart. Grown-ups have lots of complicated things." But my words were too vague, too shaky. Children can feel fear even when they don't understand it. As soon as Ben ran out into the yard, I closed the kitchen door and called Hannah. She answered after just one ring, her voice already laced with worry. "What happened?" "I warned you," I said bluntly. "Ben is starting to ask questions about Richard." I heard her swallow hard on the other end. Richard just needs to keep some distance. He just needs to stay low-key, that's all." But Hannah reacted instantly, her voice tightening. "No, we've decided. If anyone asks, Richard is a distant relative of Daniel's. They share some similar traits, a simple, easy-to-follow story." I nearly let out a bitter laugh. "Another made-up story? Another disguise? You really think that will fool a smart child?" "It's the only option," Hannah said, sounding cornered. "We don't want Ben shocked. We don't want Marcus suspicious. Richard needs to be present in Ben's life in the least messy way." "The least messy way," I repeated, my voice turning cold. "The least messy way is for both of you to disappear from our lives." Hannah didn't answer. I heard her breathing hard. Finally, her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. "You know that exposing this truth would destroy everything. Marcus, Ben, everything would fall apart." I closed my eyes, and in that moment I saw clearly where my limits were. The truth, even when right, could become a blade cutting straight into my family. Ben was too young. Marcus was already too wounded. I couldn't take another disaster. So I answered only with a sigh. "Do whatever you want. Just don't let Ben get hurt." On the other end, Hannah's voice trembled. "We'll be careful. Ben just needs time to get used to things. And later, if necessary, we'll tell him a small part of the truth." I immediately pushed back. No more half-truths, no more layers. Every new lie weighs everything down even more. But Hannah whispered, "Sometimes that's the only way to keep going." I hung up before I said something cruel. That evening, I sat alone on the porch, watching the streetlight glow against the patches of leftover snow from last week. The December air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning wood from the neighbor's chimney. Ben was asleep on the sofa, hugging the brown teddy bear Daniel once gave Marcus. But instead of feeling peaceful, I felt hollow enough to hear my own heartbeat. I had lived long enough to understand one thing. Nothing is more dangerous than a big secret brushed by a child's hand. Children don't fully grasp things, but they feel and they remember. Small questions grow into big ones over time. I looked at Ben sleeping, his little eyebrows slightly furrowed as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. In him, I saw the future. A future where he would have to live inside the web of lies adults spun around him. And I, the grandmother who loved him more than anything, was the one holding the main thread of that web. The sadness sat heavy on my chest like a stone. I stroked his hair gently and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ben. I'm trying my best to keep you out of the storm, but sometimes even I don't know where the storm is coming from anymore." Then I leaned back, staring into the thickening darkness outside the window. The secret, the one about Daniel, about his death, about the betrayal and the guilt, was no longer something I was hiding. It had become a living thing, a shadow following every step of my family. And the day Ben asked his first question, I knew the road ahead would no longer be smooth, not because I didn't want to tell the truth, but because once spoken, the truth would destroy everything good left in this family. All I could do was hope one thing, that I would be strong enough to keep everything from collapsing, at least until Ben grew up and could handle the truth we had buried for far too long. The family birthday party that year happened on an early spring afternoon, when the air still held a bit of chill, but the sunlight was warm enough for everyone to sit in the backyard. I hung little flag banners along the fence. Marcus blew up balloons, and Ben ran around with his paper hat tilted to one side. Everything looked like an ordinary family preparing for a special day. If you didn't count the fact that the two guests about to walk through that gate were the ones who destroyed my family, and the living shadow of Daniel under the name of someone else. When the SUV stopped, I inhaled so deeply my chest hurt. The door opened, and Hannah stepped out first. She was dressed more neatly than usual, a cream dress, a light jacket, the gentle look of a woman who had stabilized her life. Right after that, Richard stepped out, not hiding, not avoiding, but with the posture of a legitimate partner, his hand resting lightly on Hannah's back the same way Daniel had supported me for so many years. I heard Marcus's voice behind me. "Mom, they're here." I had to fight not to wince when I saw Marcus smiling as he greeted them. It wasn't his fault. He didn't know anything. He just saw two adults trying to behave civilly after a divorce. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over with the most artificial smile I had ever worn in my life. "Hello, both of you. Thanks for coming." Richard nodded, trying to soften his expression, but there was still something in his presence that made it hard to breathe. Too much like Daniel. The stance, the eyes, the restrained smile. Even if I told myself 100 times that this was Richard, not Daniel, my body still reacted through memory. I had to pretend this was the first time we were meeting, as if I hadn't stood in that cabin at Pine Hollow Lake, facing him in the dark, listening to him reveal secrets that shattered my life. Ben didn't sense any of the tension. He ran to hug Hannah, then turned to Richard. "Mr. Richard, let me tell you, I got the best sticker in class today." Richard bent down, smiling warmly at him, and in that moment, I saw the two of them, Richard and my grandson, as if they were standing inside a family picture I would never allow to exist. I had to turn away to catch my breath. The party went on as usual. Marcus grilled meat, Claire came too, bringing a homemade apple tart. Everyone ate and chatted. Only I was aware of every movement Richard made, as if each of his steps threatened the fragile stability I had tried so hard to hold on to. Ben laughed the whole time, and Marcus felt relieved because everyone is getting along again. He didn't know that this harmony was just a new coat of paint covering a wall that was already split wide open underneath. When the weather started to turn cold, Marcus patted Richard on the shoulder. "Hey, stay a bit. I want to talk about Ben's summer classes." I froze. It wasn't about the summer classes. It was about Richard staying, about letting a man with Daniel's face discuss my grandson's future, right inside my home. "All right," Richard replied, his voice light as the wind. Hannah smiled with gratitude, and I clenched my teeth until my jaw throbbed. While everyone was clearing the table, I went into the kitchen to brew a pot of tea. Richard followed me. No rushing footsteps, just a quiet presence that raised goosebumps along my back. I set the kettle on the stove. Richard stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets. "We need to talk," he said. "I don't think we have anything left to say," I answered without looking at him. "Yes," he said slowly. "I want to do the right thing." I let out a short, sharp laugh, like a shard of glass. "The right thing? Now? After everything that's happened?" Richard fell silent for a moment. "You may not believe me, but I never meant to destroy your family. Daniel, he pulled me into this. I only followed because I owed him my life." I turned around, looking directly into the eyes I had stared into for 40 years, even though the man standing there was not my husband. "A life debt doesn't give you permission to take someone else's family," I said. "It doesn't give you permission to stand here in my kitchen and talk as if you were the one forced into this." My voice was low but sharp, like a blade slicing through every excuse he had. Richard lowered his eyes. "I know everything I say means nothing to you," he whispered. "Yes," I answered, "because you represent the thing that killed my family. Not because you wanted to, not because you meant to, but because you exist. That's all." The air grew heavy like stone. Richard stood still for a long time, as if weighing every breath. Finally, he said, "I'll stay out of your way. I promise. I'll only show up if Marcus asks, or for Ben, if it's truly necessary." I looked at him, my heart cold as winter ice. "I will protect my children and grandchildren," I said clearly, "whether the person standing in front of me is the second version of my husband or not. I will not let any secret, any face destroy their lives again." Richard nodded, his eyes carrying something between sadness and surrender. "I understand," he said, "and I'm sorry." I didn't say anything else. I just turned away and poured the tea as if the conversation had been between two strangers. But when Richard left the kitchen, I placed my hand on the counter just to stay steady, because even though he had promised to stay out of my sight, even though he had admitted defeat, even though he was trying to fix what he could, I knew he was still the dark shadow hanging over my family, a quiet but persistent presence, a reminder that in this life, sometimes we don't escape the past, we only learn to live beside it. And that night, after the party ended, after Marcus and Ben hugged me goodnight, after Richard's footsteps had faded past the gate, I still heard inside my chest a small, thin vibration, like the surface of Pine Hollow Lake when touched lightly. Nothing ever truly ends, not with secrets like ours. Not when the man wearing my husband's face is still somewhere out there. The next 2 years went by in a strange rhythm, fast enough that I couldn't count the days, slow enough that each month carried a new layer of healing for my family. After a storm, people don't go back to who they were. They only learn how to stand on the broken pieces. Marcus was the first to stand up. He married Claire on an autumn afternoon in a small garden behind a church. A simple, warm ceremony, not flashy, nothing like the grand wedding he once dreamed of with Hannah. Claire wasn't stunningly beautiful or dazzling, but she brought something my family had lacked for a very long time: peace. As I watched Marcus hold Claire's hand under the string lights, his eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years, I understood. True happiness sometimes comes after pain, so deep you think you'll never recover. Ben grew faster than I could keep up. He still occasionally mentioned Richard, usually when talking about horses or watching ranch shows on TV, but deeper questions never came. Children sometimes have an odd intuition. They sense what shouldn't be touched, and I, who once feared every potential question, was now grateful for that instinctive silence. Hannah and Richard moved even farther away, to a small town near the New Mexico border. I didn't know how they lived or whether they were happy starting over. I didn't ask, partly because I didn't want to know, partly because I understood that distance was the best thing for all of us. Everything remained steady. Until that winter morning when I opened my mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. The handwriting froze my heart instantly. Richard. I went into the kitchen and made a cup of tea, my hands shaking so much the water spilled over the rim. Then I sat down, opened the envelope with a letter opener I used only for special occasions. The letter wasn't long, but every line carried a weight I had avoided for 2 years. Mrs. Brooks, if you are reading this letter, then I believe I have found the courage to send it. I do not write to ask for forgiveness. I know I do not deserve it. I only want to say what Daniel never said. Not when he was alive, not in his final days. He did not know how to love in the way a person should love. I stopped reading, just to keep my breath from breaking. Richard continued. Daniel lived his entire life in fear. Fear of being abandoned, fear of being misunderstood, fear that his true self would be seen by the people he loved. That is why he hid me, hid his past, hid even his own weakness, and that is also why he hurt you in ways he probably never understood. I close my eyes seeing Daniel's face, the familiar wrinkles, the hands that once held mine while we watched TV in the evenings. The sense of loss returned, but no longer sharp, just the softened echo of an old sorrow. Then came the most unexpected part of the letter. If things had been different, if we had grown up together, if I had met you before Daniel, maybe we could have been a real family. You are strong, kind, and deserving of a love that is whole. I'm sorry for showing up at the wrong time. Sorry for carrying the face that hurts you so much. I set the letter down. I didn't cry. The past 2 years had taught me that tears don't heal. Only action does. I tore the letter into small pieces. I took them to the backyard where the fire pit still bore traces of the wreath from that day long ago. The scraps curled in the flames, shining for a few seconds before turning black. That was right. Not keeping it, not storing it, but letting it leave my life as ashes. As I watched the ashes rise, the sun began to set beyond the western horizon. The sunset cast a warm orange glow over the yard like a soft blanket wrapping around a heart that had weathered too many storms. And I realized, after everything, I had survived. Not survived Daniel's death, but survived the truth about him, a truth I could never speak aloud, not to Marcus, not to Ben, not to anyone. But sometimes, things we cannot say still leave our chest in another way. That night, I opened the old wooden box that held the journals I'd kept since I was young. I took out a blank one and placed my pen on the first page. "I am writing this story," I wrote, "not so the world will know, but so my heart can be lighter." And I began, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter. The story I had carried for 2 years like a stone I couldn't set down. I wrote about Daniel, about Richard, about Hannah, about the things that would never be spoken aloud, and about the journey that carried me through the pain to stand here on this porch, at peace in my own way. When I finished the last sentence, I looked out the window. The sunset had faded, leaving a gentle blue-violet sky. I exhaled, long and soft. I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. I just needed to learn to live with it. And if you're reading these lines, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Have you ever carried a secret you could not say, just like I did? If you have, leave a comment below. No details needed, just a small sign that you're here, walking beside me through this story. Thank you for spending your time listening to my journey, from the painful fragments to this quiet moment of peace. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and stay for the next ones, where we, people who have been hurt, learn to walk again in the light. I am grateful for you, truly.